you've composed. Honestly, I feel ashamed. I've worked at the Shanghai Conservatory for so many years and composed some pieces myself, but they pale in comparison." Hearing her sincere and humble words, Fang Jian's admiration for her grew considerably. This teacher truly possessed self-awareness. If her compositions could be compared to the decades of accumulated work by Beethoven himself, that would be a miracle. Well, although Fang Jian had indeed seen ghosts, no one else had. Shaking his head slightly, Fang Jian said, "Professor Han, for so many years, you've devoted your energy to teaching and nurtured countless musicians. That's why you couldn't spare the attention for composition. Otherwise, you would surely have created even better pieces." Han Tian chuckled, "Oh, thank you for the compliment, Teacher Fang. But I do have a sense of self-awareness. You truly do know your limits." Fang Jian silently gave her a mental thumbs up. Min Xingyang suddenly spoke up, "Teacher Fang, might we ask what your creative process was like when composing Ocean of Flowers?" Sea of Flowers was a piece Fang Jian had once played at the music restaurant. It was also one of the most captivating pieces among Beethoven's 10 compositions. Fang Jian could play it, and he played it exceptionally well. But asking him to articulate his creative process, that truly stumped him. Damn it, if only we could bring Beethoven here to exchange ideas with these people. At that moment, Fang Jian felt his head was as big as a cauldron. He finally understood why Liang Chao called them demons. For someone who doesn't understand music, talking to these people, they truly were demons. Fang Jian pondered for a moment before saying, "Actually, when I'm composing, I never overthink it. It's just inspiration. That's right, once inspiration strikes, those beautiful melodies just start popping out of my head one after another, and I can't stop them." Min Xingyang froze, his expression puzzled. "Mr. Fang, are you saying you don't have a creative process?" Fang Jian replied with deadpan seriousness, "Exactly. Why would I need a creative plan? When inspiration strikes, doesn't it just flow out naturally?" Han Tian and Min Xingyang exchanged glances, both feeling as if they'd heard a fairy tale. Inspiration was indeed crucial. But to transform inspiration into concrete musical notes, you absolutely need a direction. No direction? You're just spouting nonsense. Had Zhang Tao not confirmed Fang Jian's identity, they truly would have suspected this man was an imposter. Not only were the two professors astonished, but the students who had traveled from afar were equally stunned. As music students, they knew all too well how incredibly difficult it was to compose a suitable, widely beloved piece. It wasn't something you could just plunk out on the piano. Without a beautiful, moving melody, such a piece simply wouldn't hold its own. But could someone truly compose one solely through inspiration, without any conceptual framework? At the very least, they couldn't. Now, the musicians looked at Fang Jian with a hint of doubt in their eyes. Were those pieces truly composed by this guy? Or had he plagiarized the work of some master? But if these compositions were created by someone else, then such exquisite melodies they couldn't possibly have never heard them before. They didn't know. They had already guessed the truth. These pieces were indeed composed by a master. But that master could never step forward to testify for himself. Fang Jian met the puzzled gazes of the crowd. Like teacher Han Tian, he too possessed self-awareness. He knew he could play the piano well, but if he sat down to discuss it with them, he feared his true abilities would soon be exposed. So Fang Jian offered a faint smile and said, "Teachers, I am today's pianist. For this wedding, I prepared several new congratulatory pieces for the couple. I'd appreciate your guidance when the time comes." Han Tian's eyes lit up. "New wedding marches? Yes. Composed by you? Yes. Wonderful. We're very much looking forward to it," Han Tian said happily. Although her conversation with Fang Jian about his creative work hadn't gone as smoothly as she'd hoped, she was genuinely intrigued by the new piece he had composed. Fang Jian nodded and said, "All right, it's about time. The groom should head to the entrance to prepare for welcoming the guests." He smiled and added, "I should also touch up my makeup and get to the piano." Zhang Tao immediately nodded vigorously, saying, "Yes, yes. Teachers and classmates, please take your seats. The bride and her party will be arriving shortly." These guests were all from the bride's side, and among those in charge of reception was a relative of the bride. But before the bride arrived, Zhang Tao definitely needed to take charge of the introductions. Soon, Fang Jian, Zhang Tao, and the others departed. Min Xingyang paused thoughtfully before murmuring, "Professor Han, do you think those pieces were truly composed by him?" Han Tian remained silent for a moment. Though she harbored some doubts herself, she replied, "Let's wait and see. Today is Qingxin's joyous occasion. We shouldn't cause any unpleasantness." The students nodded in agreement. Those present were all Chao Qingxin's true friends. Though many were still undergraduates, they were considered prominent figures within the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. They all understood that today was not the time for any disturbances. But this Fang Jian really didn't look like the kind of person who could have composed those pieces. If they ever found proof, they'd band together to confront him. "Fang Jian, those people have such an overwhelming presence," Zhang Tao murmured. "Why did Qingxin invite so many of them?" Fang Jian chuckled, "My sister-in-law is a musician. Inviting friends from her own circle is perfectly normal, right? Ha? Zhang Tao's eyes widened. What did you say? Fang Jian replied calmly, she invited friends from the music industry. That's perfectly normal. No, I meant the first part. Zhang Tao's eyes flashed, his expression demanding an answer. Fang Jian sighed helplessly. Today's your wedding day. I'll call her sister-in-law for now. You know what to do from here on out. Zhang Tao instantly broke into a broad smile. Great. Perfect. Liang Chao, make sure to record this later. Liang Chao stammered, wanting to agree but fearing his boss's scolding. But refusing seemed wrong too, this was the boss who paid his salary. Damn, this is killing me. As they approached the entrance gate, numerous vehicles slowly pulled in and the bride stepped out. Today, Chao Qingxin looked exceptionally beautiful. The bridal gown showcased the most perfect aspects of a woman. However, Fang Jian's gaze swept over the 4 bridesmaids behind her. One of them she didn't recognize. The other 3, however, were very familiar. Luan Wani wore light makeup today. Whether it was an illusion or not, Fang Jian felt her makeup seemed slightly less refined, failing to fully showcase her beautiful features. Perhaps this was intentional on her part. Then, Fang Jian immediately sensed a pair of fiery eyes fixed on him. That little minx, Wang Donglian, stared at him without any pretense. The smile on her face bloomed like a rose, making Fang Jian's heart flutter involuntarily. Chapter 128, Wedding March. Luan Wani, Wang Donglian, and Qi Yue served as Chao Qingxin's bridesmaids. Fang Jian had known this long ago. All 3 were young, beautiful, and vibrant young women. However, since Fang Jian saw them often, he didn't think much of it. But today, when they carefully applied their makeup and slipped into their bridesmaid dresses, Fang Jian realized just how breathtakingly beautiful girls could be. Well, that was something. I've attended weddings more than once or twice before. Why hadn't I ever noticed the bridesmaids being particularly beautiful before? But seeing Luan Wani and Wang Donglian today. Shaking his head, Fang Jian averted his gaze, suddenly feeling hesitant to look any longer. The bride and groom met, surrounded by their entourage, and made their way to the entrance of the banquet hall. They were preparing to welcome the guests about to enter. The groom and bride each had 4 groomsmen and bridesmaids, who stood behind them respectively. A row of handsome men and beautiful women, enviable indeed. Once the bride and groom had taken their places, the musicians from the lounge emerged. Chao Qingxin sweetly called out teacher twice before greeting her classmates. Not only did Chao Qingxin go up, but Luan Wani and the other 2 girls followed her. Only the one left behind maintained a reserved smile, standing still where she was. Clearly, she didn't belong in this circle. Fang Jian glanced at her but detected not a trace of awkwardness. This girl had clearly been through big events before. The girls chatted briefly with Chao Qingxin, then pointed at Fang Jian a few times from a distance. Whatever they said made Chao Qingxin cover her mouth and giggle. Fang Jian naturally wouldn't eavesdrop, but moments later, Liang Chao quietly approached him and whispered, Master, Brother Zhan asked me to tell you those girls suspect you hired a stand-in. He said when you play the piano later, put more force into it so they don't underestimate you. Fang Jian chuckled. Play with more force? As if playing the piano were like hitting someone, would more force make it sound better? As for whether those girls believed in him, Fang Jian never gave it a second thought. It was like exams back in school. If an unknown underachiever suddenly scored first place in the final exams, the first reaction from teachers and classmates wouldn't be, how did this kid suddenly get smart? Instead, they'd suspect, what kind of cheating did this kid pull? Did they get the exam papers early? And these young girls were right in their guesses. Fang Jian had indeed hired a ghostwriter. But this ghostwriter was someone they would never be able to find. An hour later, nearly all the guests had arrived. Even those who hadn't shown up yet were few and far between. The bride and groom then left the main hall to prepare for their entrance inside. Fang Jian naturally made his way to a corner of the banquet hall. There stood a piano. Known as the king of instruments, the piano is a delicate and sensitive instrument that demands strict control over humidity, temperature, and placement. Over time, any piano will experience mechanical issues. Therefore, pianos require constant tuning. When Fang Jian arrived this afternoon, his first task was to inspect the piano and ensure it was perfectly tuned. Asking Fang Jian to innovate? He truly lacked that capability. But tuning a piano? That was his fundamental skill. Opening the lid, he sat atop the piano stand and waited silently. Then, the MC began speaking eloquently on stage. This MC was quite witty, a famous anchor from a Ningbo TV station with immense popularity. The Zhan family must have paid a hefty sum to secure his presence. Finally, Fang Jian heard the MC announce loudly, "Music, please." And now, the bride and groom make their entrance. Fang Jian reached out and gently placed his hands on the piano keys. In that moment, Fang Jian's heart was filled with a quiet yet profound warmth. Playing the piano is not merely about hitting every note perfectly. Only by pouring abundant emotion into the performance can one truly move others through music. This truth had been repeated countless times to him by Beethoven and other pianists. To play with emotion, the pianist must first cultivate a state of mind that resonates with the piece. Only then can one's emotions be channeled through the keys. The more intense the emotion, the greater the power of that release, and the more it resonates with the audience's feelings. Of course, all this also requires the right timing, place, and people to come together. A performance at the National Center for the Performing Arts versus one in a subway passageway even by the same person yields vastly different effects. At that moment, as Fong Jian's fingers touched the keys, his heart brimmed with joy, delight, and anticipation. It was a feeling both cautious and restless. In that moment, it seemed to perfectly capture the emotions of the bride and groom. Even those unfamiliar with music found the piano playing truly beautiful. When our children get married someday, we must play this piece too. Not every family hires a pianist for their wedding. Most opt to play MP3 recordings instead. But to the ears of those professors and students at the Shanghai Conservatory, it sounded entirely different. This included the bride and the three girls, including Luan Wani. Upon hearing this emotionally charged piano performance, the faces of these music professionals visibly changed. Deeply moved by the emotions conveyed through the notes, they felt a tingling sensation on their scalps, their bodies trembling slightly beyond their control. It was excitement, and indescribable, overwhelming excitement. It was like a person dying of thirst in the desert stumbling upon a bottle of water. Or like a famine-stricken era when even tree bark had been stripped bare, seeing a bowl of savory braised pork wafting its aroma for miles when hunger had blurred one's vision. This profound impact was something those unfamiliar with music could never comprehend. The wedding march played during the entrance was brief. By the time Fong Jian paused, the bride and groom had already met in the long corridor. Guided by the MC, they recounted how they met. A few games involving the groomsmen and bridesmaids were also played. Fong Jian watched below with great interest. Yet, when Luan Wani and Wang Donglian stood alongside the other two groomsmen, a faint pang of envy stirred within him. If only he weren't the pianist, he could have been a groomsman too. But then his expression shifted slightly. Was he possessed? Feeling envious of the groomsman beside Luan Wani was one thing, but why did he find himself disliking the one beside Wang Donglian too? No, his mindset was all wrong. Fong Jian immediately pulled himself together, keeping his eyes straight ahead. Deep down, he understood something. Wang Donglian's affection for him was obvious to anyone with half a brain. During his time on the Red Road, Wang Donglian's unabashed actions and the sudden impulse that surged upon their reunion felt like they would last forever. To claim Fong Jian felt nothing would be self-deception. If he had met Wang Donglian first, he might have been moved by her. But the first person Fong Jian saw was Luan Wani. And Luan Wani was gentle as water. Even though Luan Changyang had disparaged Luan Wani several times in front of him, Fong Jian refused to believe it. In short, during the time they spent together, Fong Jian was thoroughly satisfied with Luan Wani. He had even begun contemplating entering the grave of love. At this moment, he truly dared not entertain any other thoughts. Taking a deep breath, Fong Jian withdrew his gaze and fixed his eyes on the piano. The piano was the best tool for regulating one's emotions. Gradually, Fong Jian's state of mind returned to calm. Thinking of Jean Tao, his dear friend's joyous occasion. A wave of profound joy welled up within him. The bride and groom exit. Music. Fong Jian's fingers touched the keys, and a brand new, exquisite melody flowed from between them. Chapter 129, The Sheet Music Scandal. What truly beautiful music, Han Tian declared at the dinner table, offering her unreserved admiration. Yes, his performance is so full of emotion. Even if he didn't compose this piece, he's an outstanding performer, Min Xingyang nodded repeatedly, murmuring softly. Han Tian chuckled softly. What? You still doubt him? Don't forget, those two wedding marches were brand new. At the very least, I've never heard them before. Min Xingyang gave a wry smile. Professor Han, I just find it hard to believe that someone who came straight from the University of Life could truly compose so many beautiful pieces. Han Tian glanced at him, thinking to herself. I don't believe it either. But she hadn't just composed one piece. Counting the earlier ones, there are already over 10 compositions. And each one is so outstanding, utterly captivating to listen to, and makes you want to pick up an instrument yourself. Such compositions. With so many music professors at the Shanghai Conservatory over the years, who knows how many piano pieces they've composed in total? Yet pieces of this caliber remain few and far between. They're essentially the result of a sudden burst of inspiration, created in a moment of passionate fervor by a particular professor. Yet, a single such stroke of genius composition in a professor's lifetime is enough to cement their fame in the music world. More than 10? Even if you killed them, they couldn't manage that. Therefore, after hearing Fong Jian perform these two wedding marches, Han Tian had no choice but to concede. Those pieces were most likely composed by Fong Jian. Professor Han, this piece is absolutely beautiful, whispered one of her favorite students, leaning in close. I forgot to transcribe it earlier and missed a few notes. You must have the full version, right? Han Tian shot her a disapproving look and scolded playfully, all you care about is good music. I'm getting old, I didn't catch everything either. Ask your classmates to piece it together. See if we can reconstruct the simplified notation for these two pieces. Got it, the student replied cheerfully. If only 2 or 3 people were listening to the music live, she'd still worry about not getting the whole piece together. But now, there were over 20 classmates here. Every single one of them was in the music world. After studying music for so many years, transcribing music by ear was as natural to them as eating and drinking. So she had no worries at all. Soon, they borrowed paper and pencils and began transcribing the music. Thus, these 3 tables became a striking sight. The other tables had already started eating after all, it was getting late, and many were famished. Yet, almost no one at these 3 tables touched their chopsticks. They were all holding paper and pens, writing something intently. Judging by their completely absorbed expressions, it seemed the delicious dishes on the table couldn't possibly capture their attention. Truthfully, these 3 tables had been particularly eye-catching from the start. While the other tables were filled with relatives and friends of the 2 families, these 3 tables were occupied solely by professors and students from the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. Not only were they all handsome men and beautiful women, but their identities alone were enough to draw attention. Now, witnessing their unusual behavior only deepened the sense of wonder. Soon, Wang Donglian approached. She first came to Han Tiantian, affectionately linking her arm through hers and saying, "Teacher Han, I came to see you." Han Tiantian affectionately tickled her little button nose and teased, "Qingxin's already married. When will it be your turn?" Wang Donglian's cheeks flushed crimson instantly. She gently pushed Han Tiantian away and pouted, "Teacher, you're teasing me." Han Tiantian laughed heartily, yet her tone held a hint of curiosity. "You little minx, got someone special in mind?" Seeing Wang Donglian look so bashful was indeed a rare sight. Wang Donglian quickly changed the subject. "Teacher Han, what are they doing? Are you going to assign them homework today?" Watching her younger classmates scribble away so earnestly piqued Wang Donglian's curiosity. Han Tiantian chuckled, "You're mistaken. I didn't assign homework. They're just afraid they won't remember the pieces we just played, so they want to write them down right away." "The piece from earlier?" Wang Donglian froze, then laughed helplessly. "You mean they're transcribing? Those 2 pieces Brother Fong just played?" "Yes." Wang Donglian resisted the urge to roll her eyes, feeling that since leaving the Shanghai Conservatory, these familiar classmates had somehow all gone soft. "Teacher Han, if they wanted the sheet music, they could have just asked me directly. Was it really necessary to go to such lengths? Just ask me?" Han Tiantian exclaimed in surprise. "Donglian, don't be rude. He's a true master." Hearing Han Tiantian's words, Wang Donglian felt an inexplicable surge of happiness. Earlier in the lobby, during their conversation, many students felt Fang Jian didn't seem like the composer of those pieces. But after Fang Jian played 2 pieces, these aloof musicians one by one dropped their reserve and shamelessly started copying the sheet music on the spot. What could speak louder than that? By now, everyone had finished transcribing the pieces and was exchanging notes. If they encountered discrepancies in their transcriptions, they compared them with others and discussed the differences. The 2 consolidated sets of transcribed pieces were gathered into Han Tiantian's hands. Han Tiantian glanced over them and said, "Old Min, take a look and see if this is correct." Min Xingyang accepted without hesitation, reviewing the notes while tapping out the rhythm on his hand. After a moment, he said, "It should be correct." With that, he pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos. Han Tiantian chuckled silently. Old Min, while his words still expressed doubt about Fang Jian, but his body was being quite honest. Wang Donglian's eyes darted around. "Professor Han, should I take this to Brother Fong to see if there are any mistakes?" Han Tiantian hesitated before replying, "Donglian, please explain to Brother Fong that we're merely transcribing the scores, nothing more. If he agrees, I'd like to take these 2 pieces back to the Shanghai Conservatory to discuss them with my students. Would that be acceptable?" Wang Donglian immediately replied, "No problem at all. Brother Fong is very easy to talk to." She patted her ample chest and declared, "I'm practically Brother Fong's manager." With that, she grabbed the sheet music and dashed off. Han Tiantian smiled, her mind filled with speculation. "All right, let's eat first," she said. "Otherwise, the food will pile up." Only then did the group realize they were hungry, and they began to wolf down their food. Yet, no matter how fast they ate, it still looked quite elegant. It just goes to show good looks can overshadow a lot of things. "Fong, look at this." Fang Jian glanced at Wang Donglian in her formal gown, then quickly looked away, not daring to linger. After glancing at the sheet music twice, Fang Jian chuckled, "If you wanted the score, you could have just asked me for it. Why go through all that trouble?" Wang Donglian chuckled, "It's not for me, it's for my classmates. They pooled their resources to get it. Could you check if it's correct?" Fang Jian scanned it once and nodded. "No wonder you're a top student at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. You got it all right after just one listen." He couldn't help but marvel inwardly. These people's abilities were truly not to be underestimated. Wang Donglian approached with a beaming smile and said, "Brother Fong, I'll be hosting them tomorrow. I've reserved the concert hall at the Jiangbei Opera House for the afternoon. Professor Min should be performing on stage. Would you like to join us? Sing? Yes, Professor Min is our university's premier tenor. Wang Donglian's eyes sparkled. He rarely performs these days, but since Sister Qingxin is his star pupil, he'll surely show off his skills now that he's here. Fang Jian smiled faintly. Thanks, but I'm not really into tenors. Pop music suits me better. Wang Donglian's face fell. She gritted her teeth and said, Daier is going tomorrow too. Fang Jian paused, scratching his scalp. Since you're inviting me so earnestly, I suppose I'll go and appreciate it. Wang Donglian felt her teeth itch with frustration. Her chest swelled with anger, threatening to burst out of her dress. Chapter 130, The Three Tenors. That evening, some people went to crash the wedding night. But Fang Jian had no interest whatsoever in such a distasteful custom and left on his own. However, he didn't head home. Instead, he headed to that top-tier music studio in Jiangbei. At Wang Donglian's insistence, Fang Jian had his fingerprints taken. Thus, even without Wang Donglian accompanying him, he could come any time. His decision to ultimately accept Wang Donglian's kindness did not mean Fang Jian had betrayed his initial instincts. Rather, it was because he needed to practice. He unlocked the studio and closed the door. Fang Jian first assumed a horse stance, then focused his mind, channeling his inner strength to stimulate his qi and blood flow, allowing his latent power to circulate freely throughout his body. His internal organs trembled slightly as a surge of true qi erupted from his dantian. Roar! The surrounding space trembled, ripples of echoes reverberating as if the entire room were swaying. Of course, this was merely an illusion, the sensation created by the sonic vibrations. If Fang Jian's roar could actually shake this soundproof recording studio to its foundations, then he wouldn't be a martial arts master, he'd be a fantasy-level powerhouse. When cultivating their internal organs, masters of hidden force inevitably unleash a primal roar from their very core. That sound was incredibly loud. After trying it once at home, Fang Jian dared not attempt it again. He was certain that if he started bellowing for no reason every now and then, it wouldn't be long before psychiatrists came knocking on his door. Therefore, he would go to the park at dawn. And he never went to the same spot twice. That way, even if he happened to let out a sudden yell, at most, people would just think he was a nutcase and it wouldn't cause any commotion. After all, encountering a crazy person once in a while doesn't bother anyone. But if you encountered this lunatic every single day, any sane person would start to worry. This recording studio, however, was different. Its construction was solid. Once you step inside and close the door, forget about shouting. Even if you played every instrument in the book, not a single sound would escape. Sometimes, high-tech stuff really does come in handy. Fang Jian worked out for a full hour before packing up and leaving. Not only did Wang Donglian never come by, but even if she did, Fang Jian wouldn't be afraid. I'm a musician, after all. Musicians tend to be a bit neurotic. Especially when creating, locking yourself away and letting out a few shouts to vent. Isn't that perfectly normal? Whether others believed it or not, Fang Jian certainly did. So once he was inside here, he never worried. Back home, Fang Jian washed up and went to bed. This time, he hadn't sent money to his old man, intending to rest for a few days. Yet, in his drowsy state, he sensed his father's footsteps drawing near once more. Opening his eyes, Fang Jian smiled. Dad, you're here again. Yes, his father asked with a warm smile. How was the wedding you attended today? Fang Jian froze. Why was his father concerned about this? His father cleared his throat softly. Don't be surprised. That kid, Zhentao, I watched him grow up. It's only natural to care. Fang Jian's expression turned rather peculiar. Dad, you're not concerned about Zhentao. You're asking me when I'm getting married, aren't you? His father chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, you finally got the hint. So, when? Fang Jian rolled his eyes. Dad, my girlfriend and I just met a few months ago. We haven't even gotten serious yet. Why are you in such a rush? His father's expression darkened. That kid Zhentao is about to have a baby, and you can't even get a girlfriend sorted out. How could I not be anxious? Fang Jian froze, surprised and a little scared. Dad, Zhentao's having a baby? How did you know? Of course. They're married. Don't you think they're about to have a baby? His father declared with righteous indignation. Fang Jian stared silently at his father, but inside, he breathed a sigh of relief. He'd feared his father had somehow gotten wind of some gossip. Or that someone he knew was reincarnating and becoming Zhentao's son. If that were the case, he'd find it a bit unsettling. Fortunately, it was all just his father's speculation. Listening to his father's incessant chatter by his ear, Fang Jian felt utterly speechless. Suddenly, a thought struck him. Dad, he said, find me another singer. What? His father's face darkened with displeasure. He'd been scolding his son and hadn't finished yet. Fang Jian adopted a serious tone. Your daughter-in-law's teacher is coming to Ningbo for Zhentao's wedding. He's a tenor and will be performing tomorrow. I want to learn. If I can impress her teacher, maybe she'll see me in a different light. His father pondered this. It made perfect sense. Scolding his son felt satisfying, but it couldn't interfere with the important matter of his son's marriage. His interest in scolding vanished instantly. He looked up and began manipulating the air. Moments later, he announced, "Looking for singers, huh? We've got domestic and international options. Which do you want? Who's available?" Domestic artists include Huang Jiayu, Chen Xianxian, and Zhang Guofan. The old man flipped through something as he continued, "Or international artists like Mike Jack, what's this character? Then there's the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, and Queen's Freddie Mercury." Fang Jian's face twitched slightly. Damn, every single one of them was a super-duper legend. Forget the international ones, just those 3 famous Hong Kong singers alone were legendary. These 3 were a generation ahead of even the 4 heavenly kings. Especially the last one, the legendary Big Brother, one of the 2 titans in the early Hong Kong music scene's Tam Chung rivalry. When he passed away back then, everyone thought it was an April Fool's joke. Only after it was confirmed did countless people shed tears and express deep regret. As for these 3 international figures, well, needless to say, that Mike Jackson, whatever his name is, it must be Michael Jackson. But Dad has never been interested in foreigners and never listens to foreign music. Even such a globally famous celebrity was unknown to him. The King of Cats? Who's that? Could it be the King of Rock and Roll? But Fang Jian didn't know Elvis's real name. Was Elvis Presley the same as the Cat King? But this guy's era was a bit too distant, not really Fang Jian's cup of tea. As for the last one, Freddie Mercury, he wasn't some Queen, but the lead singer of Queen. That legendary song, Bohemian Rhapsody, was his heartfelt contribution. It could be said that these individuals were the most representative singers of their time. If Fang Jian wanted to learn pop songs, studying them would be the right choice. But Professor Min Xingyang is a tenor. Tenors sing bel canto music. To the untrained ear, it sounds like woo woo woo, la la la. The kind of roar you let out when working out your internal organs with Fang Jian. Most people wouldn't understand it. Those who could understand it were no ordinary people. But the students at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music would likely understand it and hold Professor Min in the highest regard. This much was evident from the reverence in Wang Donglian's voice when she mentioned Professor Min. To be honest, when Fang Jian saw Wang Donglian's expression at that moment, he actually felt a tiny twinge of jealousy. Of course, he wouldn't admit it. "Son, which one do you want?" his father urged. "Don't waste any more time." Fang Jian shook his head. "Neither. Dad, I asked you to find a bel canto singer. Do you understand bel canto? Bel canto?" His father fiddled with the controls suspiciously for a moment before suddenly saying, "Someone recommended someone named Luciano Pavarotti. Is that okay?" Fang Jian paused. That name seemed familiar. Right, he was one of the 3 tenors, wasn't he? The reason Fang Jian had some recollection was that before the Beijing Olympics, the 3 tenors had visited China to hold a concert in support of the games. He vaguely recalled the name. "Alright, Dad, let's go with him." Soon, a super heavy man with a full beard stepped in from outside the circle. Chapter 131, The Throat That Roars Like a Dragon and Growls Like a Tiger. Pavarotti was a robust, bull-like, obese man. Upon seeing his physique, most people's first impression wouldn't be that he was a singer, but rather that he was a sumo wrestler. However, upon meeting Fang Jian and seeing his exceptionally robust physique, Pavarotti nodded with satisfaction. "Mr. Fang, I must admit I had some reservations before coming, feared I might not be able to teach you well," Pavarotti said with a smile. His appearance gave off a somewhat fierce impression. Yet when he spoke, his tone was surprisingly gentle. Fang Jian raised his eyebrows slightly. "Mr. Pavarotti, why did you have such concerns?" Pavarotti chuckled, "Because those who study bel canto must possess a robust, imposing physique. If your build isn't up to par, no matter how hard I teach, you simply won't be able to master it." Fang Jian was puzzled. Why? Because breath control. The breath for bel canto must be powerful. That's the most crucial aspect of learning bel canto. Pavarotti said seriously. To study bel canto, you absolutely must have a large belly. That's where your breath gathers first. Then, when you sing high notes or sing very loudly, the breath must surge out of your throat. Your belly must be stretched tight to prevent the breath from escaping. If you don't control the breath properly, you might not hit the high notes, or you might even go off key. Fang Jian touched his own belly, feeling a bit strange. Pavarotti noticed his gesture and chuckled. A larger physique holds more air, which aids in hitting high notes and sustaining them. The volume is also exceptionally powerful. On a real opera stage, there are no microphones. You simply must project. He tilted his head slightly, a hint of pride in his voice. "When I sing, my voice can pierce through several floors." Fang Jian looked at his imposing frame and found himself believing it. After finishing his explanation, Pavarotti said, "Mr. Fang, now show me your vocal technique." "My vocal placement? Well, sing. I want to hear the range of your voice." Fang Jian pondered for a moment before asking, "Does that mean the higher the pitch, the better?" Pavarotti chuckled, "The key is to avoid straining your voice." Fang Jian nodded slightly. This was his first encounter with bel canto. To be honest, he'd been a bit intimidated by this bearded guy earlier. How many floors could his voice penetrate? What did that even mean? No, he couldn't disgrace the Chinese people. Fang Jian took a deep breath and his inner energy began to surge. Though he hadn't activated his hidden strength, the qi and blood within his body began to flow slightly. His internal organs trembled naturally and subtly. Fang Jian had nearly gathered his strength. Then, he opened his mouth. Ah, ah, ah. His voice soared upward, like scaling mountains and crossing valleys, piercing straight toward the heavens. Across from him, Pavarotti's expression shifted from surprise to shock, then gradually numbness. 3 months later, Pavarotti declared, "Mr. Fang Jian, you are the most gifted tenor I have ever encountered in my lifetime. Your voice possesses extraordinary power. It is a dramatic tenor. No, you are suited for every tenor register. Your voice possesses the richest resonance space. That dark timbre, that dramatic tension in the vocal range, it's as if you've transcended the limits of human physiology." He drew a deep breath and continued, "Beyond that, your high notes are effortless and agile, and you handle intricate melodic ornamentation with ease. I've never seen. Watching Mr. Pavarotti's emotional reaction, Fang Jian felt a bit embarrassed. Singing it can be incredibly difficult, but then again, for those with the right conditions, it really isn't that hard. Fang Jian hadn't understood music before. But after years of daily immersion under Beethoven's tutelage, his mastery of pitch had become extraordinary. In this regard, even the renowned Mr. Pavarotti before him fell short. After all, he was a tenor, not a pianist. In certain respects, they simply cannot be compared. As for the natural talent of a tenor, Fang Jian could only say, what about that fiery vocal range spanning C to C2, spanning 15 degrees? When faced with the earth-shaking roars of martial arts masters, all these so-called tenors? Just little brothers. A tenor voice relies on 3 pivotal points. When singing, the power from these 3 points must both counteract and harmonize, allowing the entire body to stretch steadily and achieve whole-body resonance. For ordinary people, locating these 3 points is exceedingly difficult. But Fang Jian, at the peak of his external strength and with his internal power surging, was already training his very organs. Locating these points was child's play for him, and achieving that balance of opposing yet unified force was even easier. Moreover, Fang Jian could infuse his voice with power drawn from his very organs. As Pavarotti once said, this voice was a gift from heaven. Such a heavenly voice was born specifically for a tenor. Thus, within a mere 3 months, Pavarotti had imparted every technique he could teach to Fang Jian. What astonished and baffled him was that Fang Jian had truly mastered every single one. And when singing, though his transitions between techniques weren't as smooth as his own, the sheer power of his voice had already surpassed his. What an utterly astonishing experience this was. If Fang Jian continued singing, once his experience reached a certain level, he would completely surpass and dominate him. After Fang Jian expressed his humility, Pavarotti solemnly stated, "Mr. Fang Jian, in the days ahead, I shall discuss with you how to infuse your emotions into your singing. Explore." Indeed, by this point, Pavarotti had come to believe that Fang Jian would one day become a super tenor even greater than himself. Therefore, he had set aside his teacherly demeanor and engaged in a discussion with Fang Jian. Moreover, in the process of teaching Fang Jian, Pavarotti himself gained profound insights. Fang Jian shared his method for strengthening the internal organs. Though Pavarotti could never cultivate internal energy, nor could he follow Fang Jian's methods to channel qi and blood for internal organ training. He applied the principles to his vocal technique, achieving new heights in his artistry. In this sense, the two had indeed become mutually supportive. For a tenor, once singing reaches a certain level, it ceases to be merely a matter of technique. Limited by innate talent, every tenor possesses a specific vocal range where they excel most. This is why tenors are categorized into 4 distinct types: light lyric tenor, baritone lyric tenor, and dramatic tenor. But regardless of which category you belong to truly achieve worldwide fame, you must infuse your singing with emotion. Emotion is a power that springs from the depths of one's being, the very root of human spirit. Fang Jian was no stranger to this. While playing the piano, musicians like Beethoven repeatedly reminded him to infuse emotion into his performance. Not only that, but when he was learning painting, Tang Bowo, Chi Baisher, Van Gogh, and Picasso all said similar things. For a painting to possess life, the artist's emotions must be infused into it. The more intense that emotion, the more profoundly the work can move the heart. And among all forms of artistic expression, singing is the medium most capable of infusing emotion. Yet mastering this delicate balance is exceedingly difficult. For the remaining 9 months, Fang Jian devoted himself entirely to his studies under the guidance of Mr. Pavarotti. When the final day arrived, Pavarotti even felt reluctant to leave. They agreed to find another opportunity to explore this together in the future. Chapter 132, Emotion Stirring, Fueling the Wave into Perfection. Fang Jian awoke slowly. He sat up in bed. Ever since he began martial arts training, Fang Jian had shed his old habit of lingering in bed. Once awake, he would head to the park full of energy. Horse stance training and practicing boxing techniques had become indispensable parts of his daily life. But now, he felt no urge to move. His mind was completely occupied with what Pavarotti had taught him. Whether it was the various vocal techniques of a tenor or the principles of infusing emotion into the performance, it all gave Fang Jian a strange feeling. These things seemed completely unrelated to martial arts. Yet only after deep study did Fang Jian discover a surprising connection between them. The three focal points of tenor singing, the areas that resonate, were strikingly similar to the principle of internal force permeating the entire body, present everywhere. The difference lay in their application, one for combat, the other for song. The former could permeate the entire body, while the latter served solely as 3 points of support for singing. Beyond that, integrating sensory perception into the voice. As Fang Jian understood it, this wasn't about infusing emotion, but rather the continuous surge of mental energy, manipulating qi and blood to circulate throughout the body. Where does this mental force come from? Is it merely physical strength? No. Beyond physical strength, the surging of mental energy was more a form of spiritual power. Without sublimated spiritual power, one cannot unleash mental force to stimulate adrenaline surges, let alone master the dark force. Just as emotion can be infused into song, it can likewise be infused into the body's blood vessels. In that case, wouldn't mastering the transformation of force become even easier? Master Li had never mentioned such concepts to him before. This wasn't because Master Li deliberately concealed it, but rather because he had never encountered a tenor voice and thus couldn't possibly understand these things. It must be said that in this world, when a particular skill reaches its pinnacle, it often finds common ground and lessons to be learned from other disciplines. Those who stand at the pinnacle of their respective fields are all masters. The masters of life. Fang Jian pondered silently, seeking to fuse these two disciplines. After an unknown period of contemplation, he seemed to have gained some insight. He rose and made his way to the park. This time, he stretched his body fully and began his boxing routine. Though his mind remained as still as water, his emotions slowly began to surge and boil. It was an intensely contradictory sensation. Yet amidst this intense conflict, Fang Jian discovered a profound new level of control over his body. Hoo! With surging energy, he unleashed a punch. With that punch, not only the force of his fist, but even Fang Jian's emotions seemed to ignite. His entire body began to burn, as if he had transformed into a blazing furnace. The power of emotion was so formidable that when harnessed, it reached a level Fang Jian had never imagined possible. Huff, huff, huff. A relentless barrage of punches erupted. Each punch struck the air, so no one could fathom the immense power contained within every blow. Each punch here contained the explosive force of hidden power. The saying "a single punch could kill an ox" was no exaggeration. Suddenly, Fang Jian stepped forward. Snap! The moment his foot touched the ground, the shoes on his feet suddenly shattered. Ever since Fang Jian had money, he never skimped on himself. Even back in his days on the Red Path, he'd always worn sneakers costing over 4 figures. The shoes were of excellent quality. Unless deliberately damaged, they could easily last a year or two even with daily running. The pair he wore now had been purchased less than 2 months ago. Yet beneath his feet, they suddenly split apart, as if his feet had suddenly doubled in size, tearing the shoes apart. The other foot followed suit. Snap! The same sound echoed as this shoe too met its fate of shattering. Hidden force. This was the first time Fang Jian had unleashed hidden force through his feet. His mental energy surged, allowing him to instantly channel his qi and blood to his feet. Though he had previously succeeded in channeling his qi and blood to his waist, executing a leg sweep that seemed impossible to ordinary eyes. In truth, that had been a sudden burst of power. It had happened by chance, achieved unconsciously. If asked to repeat it, he might not have been able to do so again. But now, Fang Jian succeeded. He consciously channeled his qi and blood, directing it to his feet. It wasn't just his feet. Fang Jian sensed he had grasped the subtleties of qi and blood manipulation. His mind was as still as water, yet his emotions burned fiercely like fire. That boiling power could reach every corner of his body, and he could use this force to control every inch of his flesh. Suddenly, Fang Jian withdrew his hands and stood still. From intense motion, he halted in an instant. The transition from frantic motion to sudden stillness seemed to affect the entire world. Fang Jian's heart sank completely, utterly immersed in this profoundly mysterious transformation. Suddenly, Fang Jian felt something land on the exposed skin of his neck. In the past, he would have scarcely noticed. For it was too small, too light. Unless one actually saw it, a normal person would never notice. But at this moment, Fang Jian sensed it instinctively. His body remained perfectly still, yet with a single thought, a surge of vital energy shot upward. The latent force erupted abruptly in that instant. The skin on Fang Jian's neck seemed to swell ever so slightly before returning to stillness. Opening his eyes, Fang Jian looked down. A droplet of blood mist fell from his neck. That speck of blood mist had been an unidentified tiny insect moments ago, but now it was gone. At that moment, Fang Jian exhaled a long breath. He finally grasped the true meaning of the saying within the dark force, not a feather can be added, not a fly can land. At this moment, Fang Jian's consciousness could sense every inch of his body and skin. Moreover, under the powerful surge of his spirit and emotional force, his hidden energy and vital blood could now reach any part of his body instantly and at will. Now, should any mosquito or fly have the misfortune to land on him? Simply stirring the dark force would obliterate it into a mist of blood without lifting a finger. Hidden force was an immensely powerful energy. A single punch unleashed with full force could blast a bloody hole through a human body. If one restrains the fist's power, it can even damage the enemy's internal organs. Against mosquitoes and flies, the only option is to reduce them to a mist of blood. Slowly, time slipped away, its passage unknown. Fang Jian's mood gradually sank, until finally, it settled into calmness. In the vast ocean, towering waves rise, seemingly capable of swallowing the heavens themselves. Yet such waves cannot endure. Only the tranquil surface remains the eternal theme of the sea. The same principle applied to intense emotions. Even someone like Fang Jian could only sustain such feelings for a brief moment. Yet at this moment, Fang Jian felt utterly satisfied. For he had truly sensed the power of transforming force. He knew that as long as he continued to strive, doing his utmost to sustain and maintain this state, he would soon truly step into the realm of transforming force. With this thought, Fang Jian felt a surge of clarity, an overwhelming sense of ease and comfort coursing through his entire body. He tilted his head back and cried out, "Aha, aha, aha." His voice boomed with full resonance, thunderous and loud. It spiraled upward, piercing straight into the heavens. People near and far stopped in astonishment, all turning to look this way. What kind of lunatic is this? Chapter 133, Rehearsal. Yongchang had several theaters. But the Jiangbei Grand Theater was undoubtedly the newest and largest. Securing an exclusive booking here required far more than mere wealth. When Fang Jian drove up to the Grand Theater, he found nearly everyone had already arrived. Even Zhan Tao and his wife had arrived early, accompanying Professors Han Tiantian and Min Xingyang. It was now popular to take a trip after the wedding, embarking on a honeymoon. Zhan Tao was no exception, though he had set their departure for 10 days later. Their first destination was Milan, Italy. As for when they'd return, that depended entirely on their whims. At that moment, all the musicians, including Chao Qingxin, stood on the stage, each holding different instruments. Fang Jian glanced over, his eyelid twitching slightly. Wow! A symphony orchestra was practically complete. Below the stage, several people sat. Zhan Tao wore a broad smile, but Fang Jian could see clearly. The word impatience was written all over his eyes. As soon as he sat down beside him, Zhan Tao launched into his complaints. "Fang Jian, you see, these people have ulterior motives." Fang Jian froze, murmuring, "What?" Ever since they arrived, they've been dragging Qingxin here to rehearse. Qingxin too, just married and already thinking about this. Fang Jian chuckled helplessly. What are they rehearsing? No idea. Something about a concert at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. Supposed to be, like a month or two from now, I think. Zhan Tao frowned. Anyway, Qingxin and your two were invited. Fang Jian froze. What did he mean, those two of mine? You kid, do you even know how to speak? But as his gaze swept around, Fang Jian spotted Chao Qingxin and the other three girls. They were all part of this group. But none of them were pianists. A symphony orchestra comprised numerous instruments. Fang Jian glanced around and sadly realized he only recognized the violin, cello, and the big drum. As for the wind instrument Wang Donglian held, he'd seen it before but couldn't name it. Honestly, you couldn't blame him. Whether it was Mr. Beethoven or Mr. Pavarotti. Though they imparted much musical knowledge to him, they never once told him the names of these instruments. Fang Jian could recognize the violin and cello only because they were so famous. But if he were asked to play one, Fang Jian would probably produce a sound like diarrhea. Well, he did possess that much self-awareness. At that moment, Professor Han Tiantian also stood on the stage. She stood at the conductor's podium, baton in hand. Professor Min Xingyang, however, did not take the stage. He stood at the edge of the stage, his eyes fixed intently on the performers. He nodded slightly from time to time, seemingly quite satisfied with the student's performance. As his gaze shifted, it caught Fang Jian below the stage. He paused for a moment, then gave him a distant nod with a smile. Fang Jian returned the gesture with a slight nod and a smile. When Professor Min first met Fang Jian, he had harbored some doubts about him. However, after hearing those two new pieces yesterday, his attitude hadn't exactly done a complete 180, but it had certainly improved considerably. He was a musician himself, though his primary focus wasn't piano. But that didn't prevent him from appreciating piano music. After hearing Fang Jian's performance, he knew that this man's mastery of the piano. Well, he hesitated to say more. Because honestly, he'd inevitably offend a whole bunch of people. But to withhold the truth would feel downright shameful. True musicians hold genuine respect for those with real talent. Yet, at that very moment, Min Xingyang suddenly furrowed his brow and looked toward the stage. Ding ding ding. Han Tiantian abruptly stopped, tapped the front panel with her baton, and bellowed, "Oboe! Oboe! How are you coordinating? You're a whole tone flat. How many times have I told you to play a whole tone lower?" Her voice boomed like a lioness roaring, leaving Fang Jian speechless. "Wang Donglian, what are you doing looking around? I'm talking to you." Don't you know Professor Min is getting older and can't project his voice anymore? Are you trying to make him scream himself hoarse? But a wave of laughter erupted from the stage. Han Tian was about to continue her tirade when she suddenly realized her mistake, feeling a bit embarrassed. As for Professor Min Xingyang standing at the edge of the stage, he was rolling his eyes. However, there was not a trace of anger on his face, as if he was simply resigned to Professor Han's unfiltered remarks. Han Tian turned around and said, "Professor Min, I'm sorry." Min Xingyang waved his hand dismissively, replying with a broad smile, "No problem. I'm used to it." Ha ha ha. The crowd erupted into laughter. Fang Jian, seated below the stage, couldn't hold back his laughter either. Zheng Tao leaned over and said, "Listen to this. Who knows what's going on with them? It sounds perfectly fine to me. What's the difference between a low note and a high note?" Fang Jian paused, then said, "Actually, there is a difference." "What?" "I've heard this piece before," Fang Jian said slowly. "If a tenor were to sing it, that note is incredibly high, not just anyone can hit it." Zheng Tao shrugged his shoulders, adopting a look that said, "I don't get it, don't talk to me." Fang Jian just smiled without comment. Truth be told, if he hadn't encountered Mr. Beethoven, he wouldn't have understood either. "How long have they been rehearsing?" Fang Jian asked. "They arrived after lunch," Zheng Tao murmured. "About 2 hours ago, maybe." Fang Jian nodded slightly, unsure whether that counted as long or short. After another moment, Han Tian nodded. "Old Min, we're almost ready to try running through it." "All right." Min Xingyang had been waiting impatiently. He stepped onto the stage and announced, "Everyone, we've prepared 3 pieces for this concert, but as you know, we can only choose 2. I want to try them all and see how they sound." He paused, seeming somewhat hesitant, and said, "Let's start with I'm Like Snowflakes Falling from the Sky." Han Tian waved her baton and the music began to play. This Chinese song could be performed in bel canto style. Professor Min Xingyang's skills were truly formidable. As his resonant voice filled the air, both on stage and off, the entire venue fell into complete silence. Opera singing differs from pop music. This kind of music must be experienced live. Only in person, listening to the symphony orchestra's instruments blend together, can you experience true enjoyment. Listening to recorded tapes or similar media simply doesn't compare. Fang Jian had heard the song I Am Like Snowflakes Falling from the Sky before, but it had never particularly moved him. Yet hearing Professor Min Xingyang perform it live, he felt the song had been elevated to a whole new level. It's a pity that in today's fast-paced society, even songs have been profoundly affected. Few people can sit calmly in an opera house anymore, truly savoring the enrichment of music. After finishing the song, Min Xingyang exhaled and announced, "Next, Moscow Nights." This song was far more famous, and Min Xingyang sang it in Russian. Though he couldn't understand the lyrics, Fang Jian nodded frequently. Music, sometimes, is like that. Even without understanding the words, it can still resonate emotionally. This rendition was indeed far superior to the first song. After singing both songs, Professor Min Xingyang was covered in a thin sheen of sweat. He gave a wry smile and said, "I'm getting old, getting old. I'm not what I used to be." Han Tian smiled. "Professor Min, why don't we take a break and sing a third song later?" After a moment's hesitation, Min Xingyang replied with a wry smile, "I'm afraid not. At my age, I simply can't manage that one anymore." Han Tian's expression dimmed slightly as she sighed. She turned her head and saw Fang Jian. Her eyes lit up as she said, "Teacher Fang is here. Come on up." Chapter 134, Opera, A Joyful Day. Fang Jian froze. "I was just watching from below. How did they find me again?" But with everyone watching, he had to give teacher Han Tian some face. With a slight smile, he walked over. "Hello, Professor Han. Professor Min. Professor Fang, you're here just in time." Han Tian took the sheet music from the stand and handed it over, saying, "We listened to your 2 new compositions yesterday and found them both quite delightful." Fang Jian took the sheet music, glanced at it, and his eyelid twitched. Was this piano sheet music? It didn't quite look like it. "No, I can't make heads or tails of this." Han Tian continued, "We stayed up all night reworking it. We think this piece would work really well as a symphony. Could you take a look and see if it's feasible?" Fang Jian silently studied the sheet music in his hands, his expression inscrutable. Honestly, after studying under Beethoven for so many years, Fang Jian couldn't possibly be unable to read sheet music. But he swore this wasn't piano sheet music at all. Though he'd never seen a conductor's score before, he'd heard they were vastly different from ordinary instrumental sheet music. Today, he finally had the privilege of seeing one. But Han Tian actually wanted him to offer suggestions. "I know nothing about any instrument besides the piano, and you want me to give you advice?" Truth be told, any pianist who'd reached Fang Jian's level, even if they couldn't play other instruments, would at least have heard many. They certainly wouldn't be as clueless as Fang Jian. So at this moment, Fang Jian truly had no confidence whatsoever. He was about to admit defeat when his gaze swept across the room. Luan Wani holding the violin and the one holding the oboe. Now I know that thing is called an oboe. These 2 young women were looking at him with expectant eyes. The words "I don't know" simply refused to leave Fong Jian's mouth. A tiger dies standing tall, a donkey dies on its feet. Fong Jian took a deep breath, nodded slowly, and said, "Professor Han, you truly live up to your reputation as a professor at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music. The arrangement is superb. My compliments." Han Tian smiled. "It's an honor to receive your approval, Teacher Fong." She continued enthusiastically, "Teacher Fong, your timing is perfect. Let's collaborate on this piece right away." Fong Jian looked up blankly, his mouth opening slightly, feeling a bit at a loss. He wasn't afraid of playing the piano. Or rather, playing the piano was the one time Fong Jian could mask his flaws. But he knew playing solo and performing with an entire orchestra were two entirely different matters. And the kicker was, Mr. Beethoven had never taught him how to coordinate with an orchestra. Seeing Fong Jian's hesitation, Han Tian said, "Mr. Fong, I know pianists mainly perform solos, occasionally doing some accompaniment, and rarely collaborate with orchestras. But we truly love this piece of yours, so..." Fong Jian exhaled in relief, offering a wry smile. "Ms. Han, I've never performed with an orchestra before. I'm afraid it might backfire." "It's no problem," Han Tian smiled. "Collaboration is just a process of finding your groove. Give it a few tries, and you'll get it." Fong Jian gave a wry smile and reluctantly agreed. Typically, orchestras don't include pianos unless there's an accompaniment section. But Han Tian seemed prepared. A piano was already set up on stage. As Fong Jian walked up, everyone nodded their greetings to him. Such was the weight of one person's standing. Though Fong Jian wasn't formally part of their group, they had already accepted him. Seated at the piano, Han Tian began conducting. With the baton's rhythmic movements, a thread of exquisite music began from the violin section. The melody felt familiar. Moments later, Han Tian's baton continued its rhythm, yet all the instruments abruptly fell silent. The hall fell into complete silence, utterly still. Then, every pair of eyes on stage turned toward Fong Jian. Fong Jian froze, staring at Han Tian's baton as it came to a halt. Only then did it dawn on him. "Is it my turn?" "Ha ha." A wave of delighted laughter filled the hall, even drawing a smile from Han Tian, who had seemed unusually irritable while conducting. At that moment, everyone finally believed it. Fong Jian truly had never studied at any academy. He was a genuine musician, born from the grassroots. Yet the songs he composed and his piano skills were beyond the reach of most people in their entire lifetimes. Han Tian smiled and said, come on, Teacher Fong, let me explain it to you." Wang Donglian jumped up and said, "Teacher Han, I can explain it." Han Tian smiled, "All right, over to you." Fong Jian's expression shifted slightly as he instinctively glanced toward Luan Wani. Though the young beauty still wore a faint smile, unease stirred within Fong Jian. It wasn't fear, but rather a desire to avoid any misunderstanding, even the slightest hint of one. Whoosh! Fong Jian abruptly stood up and called out loudly, "Professor Han!" The volume startled everyone present. Had any other student shouted like that in such a setting, Han Tian would have smacked them with her baton without a second thought. But faced with Fong Jian, a young man whose talent was visibly extraordinary, she maintained her composure. "Mr. Fong, what is it?" "Professor Han, when I just walked in, I heard you rehearsing a song. Was it a happy day?" Han Tian and Min Xingyang both froze, exchanging a glance. The latter chuckled, "Professor Fong, you're interested in opera too?" They weren't surprised that Fong Jian knew the song. It was perfectly normal for a pianist to have heard it. But seeing Fong Jian looking somewhat restless and eager was a bit strange. This song does have a piano accompaniment version. But Fong Jian clearly lacked even the most basic orchestral collaboration experience. How could he possibly pick it up right away? Fong Jian chuckled softly and said, "Teacher Min, I actually really admire the three tenors too." "Oh? Which one are you most familiar with?" Min Xingyang asked, intrigued. "Pavarotti, of course," Fong Jian replied without hesitation. He had studied under the great Pavarotti for a full year. In this world, there were probably few who knew him better than he did. Min Xingyang's interest grew even more intense. He burst into laughter, finally understanding why Fong Jian had specifically mentioned this piece. Because O Mio Babino Caro was one of Pavarotti's signature songs. Back in his prime, whenever Pavarotti sang this piece, it would send the entire audience into a frenzy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he electrified the entire venue. Sadly, as the great tenor aged, he rarely performed it after turning 40. This remains one of many people's regrets. Of course, this isn't to say that Pavarotti was the only one in the world who could sing it. Rather, it was simply the song that suited him best. Beyond him, few others could deliver it with such flawless perfection. Min Xingyang asked with interest, "Teacher Fong, have you ever learned it?" "I practiced it for a while." If anyone else had said that, Min Xingyang would have scoffed. Can a tenor voice really be self-taught? But then, considering Fong Jian's piano skills, Min Xingyang suggested, "How about we give it a try?" Fong Jian was willing to do anything to avoid Wang Donglian's live instruction. He replied, "Sure, Mr. Min, you go first." Min Xingyang nodded. Teacher Han, help me transpose it down to B flat. Han Tian nodded reluctantly, though she felt a pang of regret. So the music began to play once more. Min Xingyang's expression grew solemn as he began to sing. This time, his concentration was intense, and his performance was clearly superior to the previous two songs. Han Tian and the others knew this song was actually Professor Min Xingyang's specialty. It was simply that age had made it difficult for him to sing it well anymore. Even so, even Zhang Tao and the audience could tell this song was far more powerful and beautiful than the previous two. After the song ended, the audience erupted in applause. The students' gazes fixed on Min Xingyang, burning like fire. Chapter 135, Is this Pavarotti reincarnated? Fang Jian clapped lightly. But inwardly, he remained unconvinced. It wasn't that Professor Min sang poorly. To be honest, his voice actually suited this song quite well. Had there been no masterpieces before him, Fang Jian would have appreciated it. At the very least, Professor Min had managed to convey the emotional depth reasonably well. But the problem was, he'd followed Pavarotti for a year and must have heard this song at least 100 times. And the caliber of those two. If you've been feasting on delicacies all along, could you calmly accept being served coarse gruel overnight? Of course, Professor Min possessed considerable skill himself. But when it comes to singing, especially in the tenor register, even the slightest difference sounds like worlds apart to trained ears. Zhang Tao naturally couldn't tell the difference, but Fang Jian couldn't pretend not to hear it either. Min Xingyang gave a slight nod to the crowd, then turned to look at Fang Jian with a smile. He too wanted to see how this young man, who possessed extraordinary talent at the piano, would perform vocally. Fang Jian stepped into the performance area. In a typical symphony, if there were no vocalist, the conductor would be the focal point. But with a vocalist present, the focus inevitably shifted to them. Fang Jian turned to Han Tian and said, Professor Han, it's a joyful day, no need to lower the key. What? On stage, everyone froze, then over 20 pairs of eyes turned toward Fang Jian simultaneously. Their gazes held surprise, confusion, bewilderment, and even a hint of disdain in some cases. They all acknowledged that Fang Jian possessed a piano talent beyond the reach of ordinary people. But this was a tenor part. You, a student from Jianghu University, truly understand what a tenor is? This piece isn't transposed? Can you even handle it? Do you really think you're Pavarotti or something? A flicker of hesitation crossed Han Tian's face. Min Xingyang's brow furrowed as well. After Fang Jian performed those two pieces at yesterday's wedding, his impression of him had shifted. He recognized Fang Jian's talent. That was why he had been so open with Fang Jian today. But in this moment, that goodwill vanished instantly. Singing A Happy Day without lowering the key? This song held a pivotal position within opera. It is a selection from Donizetti's 1840 opera La Fille du Regiment, also translated as Oriental Love. The lyrics are in French. The opera's plot revolves around the Napoleonic Wars, and it features the most famous 9 high CS in opera history. This opera is rarely performed, partly because even the world's top singers dread those 9 high CS. In fact, since the early 20th century, nearly 20 tenors have recorded this piece, and there are 6 or 7 complete opera recordings available. Of course, most have transposed it down. Over the 120-plus years between 1840 and 1968, dozens of renowned tenors graced the world stage. Yet any who attempted this aria in formal opera performances lowered it to B or B flat, fearing they might ruin their reputations by failing to sustain the notes. In reality, it wasn't until after 1965, with the emergence of the great Pavarotti in the bel canto world, that this legendary masterpiece received its first complete interpretation, finally fulfilling Donizetti's dream from over a century earlier. Therefore, Min Xingyang's ability to successfully perform it lowered to B flat already places him among China's most elite tenors. As for singing it without lowering the key at all, even Wan Donglian and everyone else felt. Mr. Fang had become recklessly overconfident. Ahem, Fang Jian cleared his throat heavily. What's going on? He had sung this song himself while studying under Pavarotti. Moreover, thanks to his superior breath control, while he might have lacked emotional depth, his mastery of vocal technique was unmatched. He was supremely confident. If they really lowered the key, he'd feel out of place. Han Tian gave him a deep look before turning away. Everyone, take note, no lowering the key. Happy Day, begin. The music began to play, and with its rhythm, Fang Jian slowly opened his voice. Pour mon âme quel destin. I have a flame, and I have a hand. You can tell how good someone is at singing the moment they open their mouth. The moment Fang Jian began singing, Min Xingyang's eyes widened in astonishment. He stared at Fang Jian in astonishment, as if witnessing an alien. Han Tian and the others were even more astonished, yet as professional musicians, they remained fully focused on their performance. At that moment, sensing the power contained within the singing, everyone's enthusiasm was ignited. The music seemed more generous and more stirring than usual. Min Xingyang clenched his fists tightly, his body trembling slightly from the intense tension. He stared intently at Fang Jian, his gaze growing more intense with each passing moment. By the 5-minute 40-second mark, beads of sweat had begun to form on Min Xingyang's forehead. This piece lasts approximately 7 minutes, and at 5 minutes and 40 seconds begins an astonishing sequence of 9 consecutive high Cs. It features 2 leaps from middle C to high C, followed by 2 leaps of a perfect octave each, culminating in a sustained high C that concludes the entire composition. There are 5 distinct high C notes in total. However, the first 4 ascending C notes are sung in 2 breaths each, while the final one is sung in a single breath. Thus, there are 9 distinct sounds in all. These 9 high Cs are the very essence of the piece. Whether the piece achieves perfection hinges entirely on this moment, starting at 40 seconds into the 5th minute. At last, the moment arrives. Jour prospère. Ma voix militaire est mari. Militaire est mari. Fang Jian's voice suddenly soared, all 3 vocal anchors within him fully activated. Volume, no falsetto, penetrating power, metallic resonance. Wave after wave of earth-shaking, power-filled sound poured forth from his mouth. Each of these 9 high notes was stronger than the last, each more impactful than the previous. Min Xingyang's face flushed crimson, veins bulging like a fish gasping for air, his expression contorted with fury. In 1968, at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, during a performance of La Fanciulla del Reggimento with Australian soprano Joan Sutherland, he became the first singer to hit 9 consecutive high Cs with chest resonance in the original key between 1840 and 1968, cementing his status as the world's premier tenor. From then on, Pavarotti was hailed as the king of the high C. For others attempting the feat, the notes either soared shrilly or sounded muffled and low. The comprehensive nature of art is difficult to judge, but the hard metrics stand as they are. Pour mon âme quel destin. I have a flame, and I have a hand. My voice is soldier and husband. My voice is soldier and husband. At that moment, Fang Jian spread his arms wide, unleashing a thunderous explosion from the 3 pivotal points within his body. That resonant, powerful voice seemed to pierce through everything, soaring straight into the heavens. In this moment, he seemed possessed by Pavarotti himself. No, his voice was even more soaring and beautiful than Pavarotti's. This intense, unparalleled power of expression propelled the entire atmosphere to its climax. Simultaneously, all the performers, including conductor Han Tiantian, were carried to their own climax by this stirring, soaring sound. They poured their very souls into the performance, and the majestic music surged like a tidal wave, sweeping over every heart present. Finally, the piece concluded. As the performers drew out the final note, when Fang Jian's final sustained note faded away, a moment of silence fell over the grand theater. Then, thunderous applause erupted, drowning out everything else. Min Xingyang's lips trembled. A single thought filled his mind. Pavarotti. Was this Pavarotti reincarnated? Chapter 136, Teacher Fang, you're too amazing. Teacher Fang, you're incredible. Teacher Fang, thank you for letting us hear such a beautiful voice. Teacher Fang. No one knew who stood up first. In what seemed like an instant, Fang Jian found himself surrounded by a crowd. They were all his students, their faces radiant with excitement. If Professor Min Xingyang's performance had left them burning with passion, this was a feverish fervor that could drown everything, a fervor powerful enough to shatter one completely. Fang Jian had never chased after celebrities, but in this moment, he felt something. He had become a star. Especially when he met the gaze of several young girls, he even had a distinct feeling. If he were to wave them over, he could probably discuss the greatness of music with them alone. Of course, Fang Jian, now possessing formidable self-control, would never do such a thing. He glanced toward the outer edge of the crowd. Immediately, he spotted Chao Qingxin and the other 3 girls. Perhaps because they were the hosts, they felt awkward about claiming prime spots and had instead been pushed to the very edge of the crowd. His gaze swept over Luan Wani and Wang Donglian's faces. They too were visibly moved, their reactions even more intense than those of the seniors and juniors around them. Their gazes toward Fang Jian brimmed with admiration, respect, and an indescribable affection. Had only one of them been present, Fang Jian might have felt a touch of smug satisfaction. But with both of them present, Fang Jian felt a sudden pang of unease. He immediately withdrew his gaze, maintaining a composed smile as he calmly handled the crowd around him. The moment he stopped looking at the 2 of them, his gaze cleared. No matter how many people surrounded him, he handled them with ease. Teacher Fang, may I add you on WeChat? I have some questions I'd like to ask you, a young girl said softly. Among the many beauties at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, this girl was one of the most outstanding. In terms of both appearance and figure, she was no less striking than Luan Wani. Compared to Wang Donglian, she held a distinct advantage. As she asked, a blush spread across her cheeks, radiating a delicate, demure shyness that stirred the heart. Fang Jian smiled faintly, as if not quite catching her meaning. Sure, we can set up a group chat. Any questions can be discussed there. His gaze didn't linger on the girl's face but remained open and direct toward everyone. But there's one thing I need to clarify. I graduated from Jianghu University, well, not yet graduated. So, I'm a bit lacking in music theory and can't compare to all of you. I'm just a bit more hands-on. I probably won't be able to answer most of your questions and might end up disappointing everyone. No, that won't happen. Exactly, Teacher Fang, just focus on the hands-on work. Hands alone won't do, my mouth needs to move too. Fong Jian's smile froze. Damn it, were they being unintentionally rude, or was this deliberate? Why did he alone detect such a thick, unscrupulous undertone? Alright, break it up, break it up. Han Tian finally couldn't stand it anymore and tapped the front panel with her conductor's baton. Only then did the crowd reluctantly disperse. Before Han Tian could approach, Min Xingyang stepped forward, grasped Fong Jian's hand firmly, and declared, "Teacher Fong, you're truly amazing. I'd like to invite you to participate in this year's music exchange conference hosted by the Shanghai Conservatory of Music and perform a joyful day at the event." Fong Jian froze. What the hell? Han Tian also froze, saying, "Old Min, the program has already been submitted." Min Xingyang waved his hand dismissively. So what if they've been submitted? Withdraw mine and replace it with Teacher Fong's. Han Tian looked utterly flummoxed. But that might not be appropriate. Why wouldn't it be? A voice like this, if the world doesn't hear it, it's a crime. Rest assured, I'll personally speak to the president. If he refuses, I'll camp out at his house, sleep there, and make his life miserable. Fong Jian's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He never imagined that Professor Min, who appeared physically robust, possessed an even more formidable temperament. Who threatens their superiors like that? This was just too intimidating. But seeing Han Tian's helpless expression, Fong Jian knew this man was exactly the type to pull something like this off. Alright. We'll discuss this matter later, Han Tian laughed. Teacher Fong. Hold on. Fong Jian finally couldn't hold back. Professors, you're so much older than me. Calling me Teacher Fong all the time is like shortening my lifespan. Just call me Xiao Fong. Han Tian considered it for a moment. Alright, Teacher Xiao Fong. Actually, Professor Min is right, your singing should be heard around the world. Why don't you enter the competition? Fong Jian froze. You just opposed it a moment ago. How? Turns out you were just putting on an act. But Fong Jian wasn't interested in this. No matter how sincerely these two professors invited him, he didn't agree. If anyone else had been so ungrateful, the two professors would have stormed off long ago. But when it came to Fong Jian, they simply couldn't bring themselves to do it. Noticing the awkwardness, Zhang Tao interjected, "Gentlemen, it's getting late. Why don't we grab dinner first?" He paused, then added, "We can discuss it over the meal." Han Tian and Min Xingyang exchanged a glance and agreed. Actually, it was still a bit early for dinner. They could easily rehearse a few more times. But from the two professors down to the students, no one felt like it anymore. The surging waves of song that had just reached their peak had not only hit the climax but also carried away all their passion. Both professors were shrewd individuals. They could see clearly that continuing the rehearsal now would inevitably diminish the effect or even backfire. Therefore, they stopped immediately. No one had anticipated this outcome. At that moment, it seemed as though everyone had endless words to say. Though they couldn't compete with the professors for Fong Jian's attention, they still chattered excitedly with their classmates. Their conversations were largely similar, all expressing shock and excitement over what they had just witnessed. Led by Fong Jian's singing, through the communication of music, everyone was filled with passion during the performance. That state had reached their absolute peak. The intense emotions released in that instant provided them with immense catharsis, naturally filling them with immense excitement. The group left the Grand Theater and boarded 2 buses. Dinner was at a renowned seafood restaurant in Yong City. Originally, 3 tables had been reserved, but at the group's strong request, they ended up combining 2 tables. They wanted better interaction. Fortunately, Zhang Tao was a local insider here, and the owner was also his buddy. With just one word from him, the arrangement was immediately changed. Outside the private room, Zhang Tao tugged gently at Fong Jian's sleeve and whispered, "Damn it, how did you learn to sing?" Fong Jian retorted, "Why can't I sing? Is it that bad?" Zhang Tao thought for a moment and said, "It's good. It gave me goosebumps." Zhang Tao certainly couldn't understand the lyrics of an a cappella song. But that soaring voice, when it echoed in a theater like this, created an incredibly powerful effect. Even someone unfamiliar with music would feel stirred, tense, adrenaline surging. Getting goosebumps was perfectly normal. If anyone could listen calmly to the end, it would only mean the singer wasn't skilled enough. Suddenly, Wang Donglian approached and stood beside Fong Jian. Then, she blinked her bright, large eyes and fixed them on Zhang Tao. Zhang Tao's mouth twitched slightly, feeling another wave of goosebumps rising. "Alright, I'll leave. You two chat." Zhang Tao patted his butt and, despite Fong Jian's pleading gaze, he walked away, utterly disloyal, walked. Chapter 137, pleading softly, the deal sealed. "Brother Fong, you're amazing." Once that annoying guy was out of sight, Wang Donglian dropped all pretense and grabbed Fong Jian's arm. Fong Jian smirked triumphantly. "You haven't seen my true prowess yet. Is that so?" Wang Donglian grinned like a sly fox. A pang of regret suddenly struck Fong Jian. Was he flirting with her? Sigh. With others like that stunning beauty from the Shanghai Conservatory who rivaled Wan Wani, he could maintain polite yet distant manners. But with Wang Donglian, someone he was already quite familiar with, he sometimes found himself making impulsive moves he later regretted. Fang Jian vaguely sensed that this might be because she was the first acquaintance he'd encountered after completing his revolutionary journey. His gaze flicked over her crimson lips before he hurriedly said, "Let's go inside." Am I that scary?" Wang Donglian retorted, clearly annoyed. "Actually, I'm here on orders." "What?" "Han Mama told me to persuade you to agree to perform." "Mrs. Han?" "You know, Teacher Han. We all call her Mom Han." Fang Jian curled his lip. "Mom? Ha! The way she yells at people during rehearsals, she doesn't seem like a mom, more like a mother-in-law." Wang Donglian froze, then burst into laughter, punching Fang Jian hard in the chest. But her strength was nowhere near enough to face Fang Jian. After a moment, she finally stopped laughing and asked, "Brother Fang, are you free tomorrow?" "No time," Fang Jian replied without hesitation. Wang Donglian's eyebrows shot up in anger. "You won't even ask what it's for before saying no?" Fang Jian chuckled and made excuses. "I promised John Tao I'd go to the club tomorrow to coach them boxing. I can't just break my promise, can I?" Wang Donglian cut straight to the point. "He can invite you, but when I invite you, you're suddenly busy? You're way too timid." Fang Jian sighed helplessly. "Better to be a little timid. If I'm too bold, I'm afraid I'll make mistakes." Wang Donglian snorted, but then suddenly broke into a smile as if something occurred to her. "Donglian, I'm coming in." "Coming." Wang Donglian answered, then added, "Oh, I'll go see Mrs. Han and tell her you agreed." Fang Jian froze, about to refuse, but when he looked up, he saw a hint of pleading in Wang Donglian's large eyes. She wasn't being unreasonable, she was just looking at him quietly like that. His heart softened, and he reluctantly agreed. "All right, I'll agree." "Yay!" Overjoyed, Wang Donglian suddenly threw her arms around him and planted a loud smack on his cheek. Then she let go and ran happily inside. Outside this private room was a corner. Unless someone deliberately peered in, it was impossible to see inside. Fang Jian touched his cheek, feeling a bit uneasy inside. Truthfully, when Wang Donglian lunged forward, Fang Jian had easily been able to block her. All he needed was to sidestep, hook her leg with a sweep, then execute an 8 extremes thrust guaranteed to send her tumbling. Good heavens, what am I thinking? Fang Jian immediately pulled himself together, took a deep breath, regained his composure, and walked inside. "Teacher Fang, this way, this way." Min Xingyang called out immediately. Few people could elicit such attentive courtesy from him. Fang Jian walked over and saw not only 2 teachers at the table, but also Wang Donglian and Luan Wani. He suddenly felt like backing out. "Teacher Fang, please sit here," Min Xingyang said with a smile. "I heard from Donglian that you agreed to perform?" Fang Jian smiled faintly. "Truthfully, I'd love to collaborate with everyone here, but you know, I'm self-taught after all." "Ah, music as long as it touches people's hearts, who cares about formal training?" Min Xingyang waved his hand dismissively. "Countless singers started out self-taught. Take that famous singer everyone knows, he started out self-taught too. This proves self-taught musicians can achieve great things. There's nothing wrong with it." The surrounding students exchanged bewildered glances. Was this really Professor Min? At the university, Min Xingyang was actually a man deeply committed to tradition and established schools of thought. He looked down on so-called pop singers with utter disdain. And in truth, when it came to genuine vocal artistry, those stars unearthed from the grassroots couldn't hold a candle to the professional masters. If any other self-taught singer dared to speak like this in front of Professor Min? See if Professor Min would even acknowledge them. At that moment, everyone inwardly grumbled. Could this Fang Jian be Professor Min's illegitimate son? But then, recalling that afternoon's unexpectedly brilliant performance, they let it go. Ah, talented people really can get away with anything. "Teacher Fang," Han Tiantian said with a smile, "Professor Min and I have decided to split this performance into 2 parts. First, we'd like you to perform a piano solo, and then we'd like you to sing Happy First Day. Her face radiated warmth, like that of a caring mother. Fang Jian nodded. "All right, I'll take whatever guidance you two have to offer." Having already agreed to Wang Donglian's request, Fang Jian now felt more decisive. Wang Donglian suddenly said, "Brother Fang, the concert is in a month and a half. Don't get injured before then, okay?" "Injured?" Min Xingyang froze, asking, "What do you mean?" Wang Donglian explained, "Professor Min, Brother Fang works as a combat sports coach and occasionally plays basketball. Last time he played, someone tripped him, he nearly broke a bone." Everyone gasped in surprise, and Luan Wani also looked over in astonishment. Playing basketball? Was it that time he went with my little brother? Why didn't my little brother say anything? I'll ask him about it when we get home. He must have been itching to get into trouble. On the basketball court, Luan Qianyang was dribbling with his teammates when he suddenly felt an itch behind his ear. He gave it a vigorous rub before diving back into the sweat-drenched game of youth. A fracture? Han Tiantian's expression darkened slightly. What happened? Wang Donglian pulled out her phone, opened Douyin, and played the video. "Teacher Han, take a look." But it wasn't just Han Tiantian who looked over, everyone turned to watch. That guy deliberately stepped on his foot, trying to break Brother Fong's leg. Ah, tripping. That's a bad guy. Yeah, that's so mean. Wang Donglian continued, and what's more, this guy injured himself by tripping over his own feet, yet he's trying to extort Brother Fong and even threatened to sue him in court. How outrageous! Han Tian exclaimed angrily. Such a shameless scoundrel. He clearly did something wrong, yet he's trying to turn the tables. It's utterly unreasonable. She looked at Fong Jian and said, Teacher Fong, don't worry. I'll make sure you get justice. Fong Jian was speechless. Was this an unexpected blessing? Oh my, Teacher Fong. So you're the one who dunked from the free throw line. Suddenly, a boy exclaimed. After seeing this video, someone finally made the connection to the other clip. The crowd erupted in excitement once more. Music and sports, though two different realms. But boys this age love basketball, and plenty of them occasionally head to the court to shoot some hoops. So naturally, they knew about this viral video that had blown up. But thankfully, being musicians, they weren't overly enthusiastic about sports, and things gradually calmed down. Han Tian cautioned, Teacher Fong, be careful when teaching boxing. Don't get hurt. Fong Jian shot Wang Donglian a disapproving look and retorted, Teacher Han, I don't teach boxing. Wang Donglian chuckled, Brother Fong, what's wrong with teaching boxing? Are you selling flowers instead? Fong Jian froze, his mouth twitching slightly. Fine, teaching boxing was teaching boxing. At least it sounded better than selling flowers. Chapter 138, Visitors to the Boxing Gym. The next day, Fong Jian arrived at Zhan Tao's boxing club. Although Zhan Tao hadn't said a word, Liang Chao had already extended the invitation many times through his words. He had to give this cheap apprentice some face, after all. The club's doors were closed, yet the sound of ha-ho shouts still carried clearly from inside. Fong Jian pushed open the door to find a scene of intense activity inside. Over 20 people were either pounding punching bags or doing strength training. On the sparring platform, two men were engaged in a match. One was attacking, while the other held a defensive shield. This was a common training method in boxing. Brother Fong. Brother Fong is here. Someone spotted Fong Jian and let out a loud shout, causing everyone to freeze. So the calls of Brother Fong echoed continuously. In this boxing club, Fong Jian was nothing short of a legend. If breaking Hu Bin's leg and that Master Zhang's arm was enough to fuel gossip for 3 months, then making a seasoned underground fighter flee without uttering a single threat was nothing short of legendary. Even years later, this story remained as widely talked about as ever. Most of these men had witnessed both fights firsthand, so their enthusiasm for Fong Jian came from the heart. Fong Jian gave a slight nod, glancing at the group before furrowing his brow. Where's Liang Chao? Brother Fong, Master Liang goes to the park every day to practice his horse stance. He hasn't arrived yet, someone quickly replied. I'll go notify him. Ah, no need, Fong Jian waved his hand. Let him stay there. Don't disturb him, or it won't be effective. Hearing this response, Fong Jian seemed somewhat satisfied. Indeed, practicing horse stance in this modern boxing gym wasn't exactly ideal. Brother Fong, you rarely come by. Could you give us some pointers? Someone approached eagerly. Fong Jian felt a bit itchy to show off. Since he was here today, he wouldn't hold back. After all, they were all members of Zhan Tao Boxing Gym. He might as well teach them a thing or two. Brothers, I didn't train in a formal school. As you'd say, I learned the wild way, Fong Jian said with a smile. If you want my guidance, it'll be through sparring. I'll go first. No, I said it first. I'll go first. A scramble erupted among the group. Though everyone knew stepping onto the stage for a real fight with Brother Fong would likely end in a crushing defeat. But this was a rare opportunity. If one could make it onto the stage and hold out even for a moment, it would become bragging rights for years to come. Even if Brother Fong knocked them out with a single punch, it would be an honor. Didn't you see all those who couldn't even get on the stage? Fong Jian smiled faintly and casually tapped 3 people. These 3 were club veterans who had even helped out at Zhan Tao's wedding. Naturally, he'd show some consideration for such veterans. Soon, the crowd parted. Fong Jian strapped on his protective gear and stepped onto the ring. Others wore protective gear to shield themselves. Fong Jian wore his to protect others. His first opponent stepped onto the ring, bowing deeply to Fong Jian before saying, Brother Fong, please teach me. After speaking, he took a step back, assumed a boxing stance, and began to jump up and down. Fong Jian watched him silently, observing his bouncing movements, yet the man stubbornly refused to advance. Moments later, a wave of laughter erupted from below the ring. Fong Jian couldn't help but chuckle. Suddenly, he lunged forward. He didn't activate his inner strength or use hidden force. He simply pushed off with his feet and leapt upward in a sudden burst. The power of peak external force was no trifling matter. This leap, swift as a hare rising or a falcon diving, reached the pinnacle of speed. Before the man could even assume a defensive stance, Fong Jian had already closed the distance and stood before him. Oh no! That was the only thought that flashed through the man's mind. Then, a sharp pain struck his abdomen as a tremendous force slammed him backward. With a single punch, Fang Jian charged forward and struck with lightning speed, sending his opponent flying. Of course, with chest and back protectors in place and using external force, he wasn't worried about seriously injuring the man. Fang Jian removed his gloves, pulled the man to his feet, and shouted, "Brother, you weren't focused enough when you were watching him." The man's face flushed red. "Brother Fang, I let my guard down." Fang Jian shook his head. "It wasn't that you let your guard down. You were fooled by me." "Ha?" Fang Jian glanced at the others and explained, "Fighting is actually quite simple. It's about deceiving your opponent's eyes, numbing their nerves, then striking unexpectedly with a single, decisive blow." The group fell silent, each deep in thought. "When I faced him earlier, I held back my attack for so long that he subconsciously assumed any move I made would follow a predictable pattern," Fang Jian explained. "But when I finally struck, it was with lightning speed, one decisive blow to end it." Patting the other man on the shoulder, Fang Jian added, "He'd grown accustomed to my slow movements. He couldn't react in time to this sudden change, which is why he was caught completely off guard by my sneak attack. That," he concluded, "is deception." When Fang Jian spoke these words, he felt a deep sense of emotion. This was what he had learned from Master Li. Swift as the wind, steady as the forest, fierce as fire, immovable as a mountain. This is recorded in Sun Tzu's Art of War. Applied to martial arts, it fits perfectly. One man exclaimed, "Brother Fang, do you really need to resort to such tactics against him?" Fang Jian replied sternly, "Once you step onto the stage, the contest begins. Whatever works best is the way to go." He added gravely, "Even a lion gives its all when hunting a rabbit. Remember this." The others responded in unison. The second and third opponents stepped onto the platform one after another. Having learned from the first man's fate, they dared not relax even slightly. Yet the gap in raw strength between them was simply too vast. Fang Jian unleashed formidable power with every move, far beyond what they could withstand. Moreover, in Fang Jian's eyes, these two fighters' movements were riddled with flaws. He could easily throw a few half-hearted feints to throw them off balance. Nevertheless, Fang Jian held back when he acted. As he threw punches, he simultaneously offered guidance, leaving everyone on and off the stage with a profound sense of enlightenment. Combat, like any other professional sport, it required grueling effort to achieve improvement. But more often than not, even with all that effort, success wasn't guaranteed. Still, those who came to train at Zhang Tao's club were mostly people with money to spare, who weren't worried about basic necessities and had a genuine passion for combat sports. Therefore, they weren't particularly driven by competition, they simply hoped to learn genuine skills here. Everyone listened intently to Fang Jian's instruction. Of course, when teaching, Fang Jian only imparted the basics and orthodox techniques of Baguazhang. Primarily, it involved using fists and legs. As for techniques like elbow strikes, finger strikes, knuckle strikes, and other such methods of attack, Fang Jian taught none of them. Suddenly, the gym door swung open. Fang Jian glanced over, assuming it was Liang Chao who had heard the news and rushed over. But that quick glance revealed it wasn't Liang Chao at all. Instead, it was an exceptionally burly man. This man looked menacing, his eyes sharp and piercing, as if he could see straight through a person's soul with a single glance. Yet, upon seeing this clearly hostile figure, Fang Jian felt an inexplicable sense of admiration welling up inside him. A soldier. That's right. Others might not have sensed it. But Fang Jian could tell at a glance. This was a soldier, radiating a strong military presence. Almost identical to Brother Wu Jiangwo. Chapter 139, another peek about her strength. Who's there? And who might you be? Those who train in combat sports at the gym certainly aren't the type to swallow their pride. This guy barged in without a second thought, scanning the room with a scrutinizing gaze. Such brazen arrogance screamed trouble. Instantly, he provoked everyone. Several young men were itching for a fight, shouting insults. They couldn't beat Fang Jian, but if an outsider came knocking, they wouldn't mind testing their skills. The man remained silent, merely sweeping his gaze around the room before finally settling back on the stage. Fang Jian had a feeling this guy might be targeting him. One young man, seeing the stranger ignore his words, finally couldn't hold back. He leaped forward. He reached out to push the stranger's shoulder, saying, "Hey, I'm talking to you." But the moment his hand touched the man's shoulder, the man grabbed his wrist. Ow! Ow! That hurts. The grab was lightning fast, snapping his fingers right in the web between his thumb and index finger. With a slight outward twist, it sent a wave of pain shooting through him, enough to make anyone wail like a baby. What the hell? Let go. He's here to challenge the dojo. A roar erupted from the crowd as several men lunged forward. Fang Jian's voice rang out, "Hold on." Every footfall halted. Here, you didn't have to give anyone face, but once Brother Fang spoke, no one dared to make a move. After all, this was Brother Fang. His words carried more weight than even Boss Shun's. Fang Jian tossed aside his gloves, hooked his hand over the rope barrier, and jumped down. He strode quickly over to the two men, smiling as he said, "Brothers, the kid doesn't know any better. Don't take offense." As he spoke, his hand closed around the other man's wrist. The burly man's eyes lit up, ready to exert force, when suddenly a faint tingling spread through his wrist. Then, the hand he had grabbed lost all strength. Fang Jian pulled the young man behind him with a swift tug. The entire sequence unfolded with fluid precision. Aside from Fang Jian and the burly man, no one else had noticed a thing. They assumed the burly man had simply let go. Impressive skills, the burly man said, giving Fang Jian a deep look. You must be the top performer at this club, right? Fang Jian paused, then laughed. Not me. The young man shouted from behind Fang Jian, you blind fool. Brother Fang is the master of our club's top star, Brother Liang. Fang Jian's mouth twitched slightly. If not for the outsiders present, he'd have been tempted to drag the youngster onto the ring for a round. The burly man chuckled. So we've run into an old master. He tilted his head back and gestured toward the ring. Care to step up and practice? Practice? Fine, let's practice. Like I'm scared of you. Yeah, daring to challenge Brother Fang? That takes some guts. Fang Gu, beat him up. The crowd behind them seemed eager for more drama, shouting loudly one after another. Fang Jian frowned slightly, thought for a moment, then said, fine. Let's spar. He sensed vaguely that this guy was probably targeting him. Yet, he didn't sense any malice emanating from the other man. This feeling was entirely different from the one Su Qing had when he stepped on his foot. Considering the man was a soldier or had served in the military and clearly hadn't let up since Fang Jian didn't mind stepping up to the challenge. The two men stepped onto the stage. The crowd below erupted in cheers, clearly eager for a show. They were all convinced Brother Fang would defeat the other man with ease. Soon, they stood before the protective gear. Fang Jian said, you're the guest from afar. You go first. The burly man's gaze swept over the protective gear, his eyes filled with contempt and disdain. Master Fang, how about we fight without the protective gear? Fang Jian saw it clearly, the contempt radiating from him was ingrained. Clearly, he had participated in bare-knuckle fights numerous times and looked down on this kind of competition with protective gear. After a moment's thought, however, Fang Jian shook his head. No, let's keep it proper. Put them on. The man sighed in resignation and selected a set, but stared blankly at the gear. The gear came in many styles, and it was nearly impossible for one person to put it on alone. Assistance was required. Fang Jian smiled and walked over to help him put it on personally. The burly man was somewhat surprised, and his gaze toward Fang Jian grew more appreciative. Moments later, both men, fully equipped with their protective gear, arrived at the center of the ring. No referees, only fighters, no predetermined round durations. Victory was determined by one fighter conceding defeat. The man crouched slightly, his piercing gaze locked onto Fang Jian's eyes. From his movements alone, Fang Jian knew this was a seasoned fighter. In a fight, one must keep eyes and ears open in all directions. And keeping your eyes locked on your opponent is also the mark of a skilled fighter. Fang Jian had done the same when sparring with Master Li. However, this style of fighting was far from simple. It offered numerous opportunities to exploit. Fang Jian's gaze suddenly shifted slightly, darting toward the burly man's right side. Simultaneously, he stepped forward and threw a punch. The burly man instinctively shifted his body slightly to the side, his right side edging back. Ha! Trouble. Then, in the very next instant, he realized. Although Fang Jian's gaze was fixed on his right side, the direction of his punch was actually aimed at his left side. This burly man possessed extensive combat experience. The technique of judging an attack's direction by observing an opponent's gaze was one he had honed through years of rigorous training. In past confrontations, this tactic had never failed him. But today, he encountered someone who defied conventional tactics. Fortunately, his reflexes were lightning fast. He sensed something amiss midway through his sideways movement. With a violent twist of his torso, his body contorted unnaturally, forcing him to dodge the blow. Fang Jian didn't immediately pursue. Instead, he paused, silently observing his opponent. His previous move had been a clever maneuver. If he pressed his advantage now, even if he won, his opponent would never concede gracefully. Sure enough, the burly man took 2 steps back and steadied himself. He looked at Fang Jian, his gaze now completely different. Fang Jian smiled and asked, ready? The burly man nodded solemnly. Ready. Watch out. With that, he unexpectedly stepped forward first, launching a fierce assault. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Each punch he threw was fast and powerful. Though each was a jab, the fierce momentum surpassed the heavy punches of ordinary fighters. The crowd below the ring initially cheered for Fang Jian, but after watching for a moment, their shouts grew quieter. They were martial artists themselves, albeit not particularly skilled, but they possessed a basic eye for technique. They could tell. Fang Jian's opponent was no ordinary fighter. Not only that, but Brother Fang showed no intention of striking back, allowing his opponent to attack relentlessly while maintaining a steady defense. As the saying goes, even the most meticulous plan can have a flaw. This style of fighting was still extremely dangerous. Moments later, the burly man's assault grew increasingly fierce. Suddenly, he roared, seized Fang Jian's opening, and drove a punch straight for his vital point. The punch carried a force that seemed to split the heavens and shatter the earth. Crack! The sound of air shattering echoed through the air. The crowd's expressions shifted, each letting out a gasp of shock. One loud crack. A sound worth 1,000 gold. Fang Jian's eyes lit up slightly. This was already the second person he had encountered capable of producing a peak-level Mingjing sound. It seemed this world truly harbored hidden talents. Fang Jian planted his feet firmly and swung a fist forward to meet the attack. But at this moment, his heart surged with power, his qi and blood rushing upward. This punch contained an even more formidable force. The fist exploded through the air. One fist moved silently. The two fists collided abruptly. Then, Fang Jian's body swayed slightly, instantly dissipating the force. His opponent, however, staggered backwards several steps. The gloves on both men's hands shattered and broke apart, scattering into fragments across the floor. Chapter 140, Making a Friend Out of Nowhere. The burly man stared at the shattered gloves in his hands, his eyes betraying unmistakable astonishment. After a moment, he looked up and suddenly said, "Brother, thanks." Now he finally understood why Fang Jian had refused without hesitation when he'd suggested fighting without protective gear earlier. Seeing the shattered gloves, even he grasped the reason behind it. Fang Jian smiled as he unfastened his gloves, then stepped forward to help the other man remove his protective gear. "You're pretty skilled yourself. Let's grab lunch together." This burly man possessed formidable strength. Among those Fang Jian had encountered, even Hong Shouqi, the underground fighter, was at best his equal. Yet, before Fang Jian, who had already set foot on the threshold of mastering the Huajin technique today, such skill could only be described as decent. "Sure," the burly man replied readily. "My name is Wang Tianpao. And you are?" "Fang Jian." Martial artists had straightforward temperaments, preferring directness. If two fighters didn't see eye to eye, 9 times out of 10 they'd settle it in the ring. But if they hit it off, swearing brotherhood on the spot was commonplace. Of course, such customs had fallen out of favor in modern society. The crowd below, seeing the two fight it out and then become friends, were delighted. One by one, they came forward to offer congratulations. Even the man who had been humiliated when Wang Tianpao grabbed his hand earlier approached without a trace of resentment. And there was even a hint of joy on his face. Though being caught was somewhat embarrassing. It all depended on who had done it. Wang Tianpao was at the peak of his external strength cultivation. He was on the same level as Hong Shouqi, the underground fighter. Even brother Liang wouldn't stand a chance against him. For ordinary trainees, being caught by such a man wasn't a disgrace, it was something to brag about. Liang Chao finally arrived, late as ever. Seeing Fang Jian, he was naturally overjoyed, calling him master repeatedly. Yet upon hearing that a challenger had arrived, one at the peak of the Mingjing realm, capable of delivering blows worth 1,000 gold pieces, he couldn't help but inwardly gasp. Having fought Hong Shouqi himself, he knew just how formidable such an opponent was, far beyond his own capabilities. If his master hadn't been present today, the dojo would likely have suffered another humiliating defeat. What puzzled him, though, was that before this, he'd never encountered a single person with such genuine martial arts prowess. Yet ever since Fang Jian arrived, they seemed to be popping up one after another. Gritting his teeth, he resolved to train relentlessly. Surely he couldn't remain incapable of defeating even a peak external force practitioner forever. Fang Jian glanced at him and said, "Go. Show me your horse stance." "Yes, sir." Liang Chao was overjoyed. This was the first time Fang Jian had ever assessed his skills. Assuming the horse stance, Liang Chao stood immovable as a mountain. Fang Jian watched silently. Liang Chao fixed his gaze on a point ahead, his eyes solemn and unwavering. His breaths gradually lengthened. He pressed his tongue tip against his upper palate, tucked his chin, and held his neck straight. Shoulders dropped, elbows relaxed, chest slightly sunken, back straightened. He engaged his core, hips tucked as if seated, knees slightly bent and bent, feet parallel and pointing forward, fingers gripping the ground. When ordinary masters checked, they would reach out to touch him. They'd demand a tight lower body and relaxed upper body, squatting as if seated until reaching the absolute limit. But Fang Jian could tell at a glance whether Liang Chao had reached his limit. It must be said, this kid has truly put considerable effort into learning martial arts. This horse stance wasn't flawless, but for a beginner, it was quite impressive. To advance further, he'd need diligent practice and rely on his own insights to make subtle adjustments. After all, the master guides you to the door, but cultivation depends on the individual. If one cannot even make subtle adjustments to their own movements, then they are merely practicing dead skills. Such individuals would be better off not practicing martial arts at all. Wang Tianpao watched for a moment before suddenly asking, "Brother, are you practicing Baguazhang?" "Yes, I am." "And you, old buddy?" I practice military boxing, but my foundation is in Baguazhang. While standard military boxing is simple and fierce, truly mastering it is no easy feat. Baguazhang is also an ancient Chinese boxing style with immense renown, in no way inferior to Baguazhang. Of course, which style is superior can't be generalized. It really depends on which master has the superior skill. Fang Jian stepped forward and delivered a light kick to the crook of Liang Chao's knees. Liang Chao's center of gravity shifted downward slightly, nearly causing him to stumble. Fang Jian murmured, "Remembered?" Liang Chao's face flushed slightly. "Yes, master." "Good. Get up. Let's go eat." The gym members watched the three of them leave with envious eyes. However, they knew their limits well enough to realize their boxing skills were no match for these three, so they dared not approach lightly. They arrived at a nearby restaurant and reserved a private room. Typically, 3 people were considered too few for a private room, and establishments were reluctant to provide one. But Liang Chao was clearly a regular here. After exchanging greetings with the owner, not only did they get a small private room, but the owner himself bustled about, serving them with great attentiveness. Fang Jian paid it no mind. Everyone had their own connections and acquaintances. Running into an acquaintance was perfectly normal. Liang Chao unwrapped the bowls and chopsticks for Fang Jian, then rinsed them with boiling water, a traditional disciple's manner. Fang Jian didn't particularly care for it, but since Liang Chao insisted, he went along with it. "Brother, our Bagua and your Bajiquan actually share some roots," Wang Tianpao declared as he ordered a bottle of liquor and poured full glasses for all 3. Though the small cups weren't large, each held a good 2 ounces. He raised his cup, downed it in one gulp, and declared, "Cheers." Fang Jian froze, his eyes going wide. He wondered inwardly, "Are you trying to save face at the table because you can't beat me in a fight?" Bottoms up. Suddenly, a clatter came from beside him. Liang Chao tilted his head back and downed his drink in one gulp. Fang Jian silently glanced at him, inwardly cursing him an idiot. Then, he raised his cup and said sincerely, "Brother Wang, I can only drink 1 cup with you. Please forgive me." With that, he downed his drink in one gulp. Wang Tianpao froze, a hint of displeasure crossing his face. "Brother, your martial arts are so good you've even mastered the hidden force technique. Surely your drinking tolerance can't be that bad?" Fang Jian chuckled. "Brother Wang, what kind of logic is that? What does hidden force have to do with drinking capacity?" Wang Tianpao replied sternly, "The better your martial arts, the better your drinking capacity." He paused and added, "I had a senior brother who, after mastering hidden force, saw his drinking capacity skyrocket. Before, I could still hold my own against him, but now I can't even match half of what he can drink." Fang Jian's interest peaked. "Your senior brother? Hidden strength?" "Yes. Next time I'll bring him along to meet you. You two would definitely hit it off." Fang Jian's eyes lit up slightly. This was the best news he'd heard all day. If he were the only one in the world capable of cultivating hidden force, it would be utterly pointless. Beyond hidden force, there was also transcendent force. He just didn't know how many such masters existed. Composing himself, Fang Jian apologized, "Brother Wang, the truth is I'm a singer. Drinking alcohol would cause significant damage to my vocal cords, numb my nerves, and impair my ability to judge pitch. That's why I can't drink much." "Singer? A singer?" Wang Tianpao's hand holding the wineglass froze mid-air. He stared at Fang Jian, his eyes filled with the strangest expression imaginable. Liang Chao struggled to stifle his laughter beside them. Truth be told, when he first learned Fang Jian had been a pianist, his reaction hadn't been much better. Who the hell could associate a hidden power martial artist with a refined, cultured pianist? Wait, that's not right. Master just said something about a singer. Liang Chao sucked in a sharp breath, realizing he understood his master less and less. This meal was thoroughly enjoyable. Fang Jian and Wang Tianpao had clashed inexplicably, yet inexplicably become friends. By 3 in the afternoon, Wang Tianpao suddenly said, "Bro, I've had a bit too much. Can you give me a ride home?" "No problem." Fang Jian called a designated driver and helped Wang Tianpao, whose legs were wobbly, into the car. He'd downed a full 2 pounds of baijiu all by himself. That he could hold his liquor like that and still keep a clear head was something Fang Jian found truly impressive. Guided by Wang Tianpao, the car soon entered a luxurious residential complex. Fang Jian glanced around, his expression subtly shifting. Chapter 141, Wang Donglian's brother. Bo Jingting. Guided by Wang Tianpao, the car drove straight into Bo Jingting. Fang Jian turned to look at Wang Tianpao, his mind filled with uncontrollable speculation. Surnamed Wang. His family is from Bo Jingting. Damn it, no need to guess anymore. If Wang Tianpao and Wang Donglian weren't related, he'd write his own surname backwards. But looking at the somewhat tipsy Wang Tianpao, Fang Jian couldn't bring himself to say anything accusatory. Because he could sense that this guy truly harbored no ill will toward him. Perhaps he came to the boxing gym because of Wang Donglian. But becoming friends? That happened because both their fists were rock hard. In this era, achieving mastery in martial arts was far more difficult than it had been during the Republican period. Modern people faced far too many temptations. Without a genuine, heartfelt passion for martial arts, it would be impossible to persevere day in and day out for a decade. Thus, the friendship between Fang Jian and him was pure and free of any ulterior motives. Finally, the car came to a stop. Wang Tianpao leaned his head out the window and bellowed. A gate slowly swung open. As the designated driver maneuvered the car inside, he kept glancing around, his curiosity clearly evident. Finally, the car came to a stop. Wang Tianpao said, "Get out, brother. Come sit in my place for a bit." Fang Jian hastily declined, "Brother Wang, no thanks. Maybe next time." "Hey, what do you mean next time? This place is your home from now on." He grabbed Fong Jian's arm and declared, I couldn't be happier with you as my brother-in-law. Couldn't be happier. Well, except for the drinking, that's a bit of a letdown. Fong Jian's face darkened. Brother Wang, you're Wang Donglian's brother? Yes, didn't you know? Wang Tianpao asked in surprise. Fong Jian was at a loss for words. Hell no, how could I possibly know? The designated driver settled the bill and shuffled away meekly. But before leaving, he shot Fong Jian an envious look. Although Fong Jian's car wasn't cheap either, a mid to high-end Q5. It paled in comparison to the caliber of this residence. The cars that came and went here were at least in the million yuan range, right? Watching the driver leave, Fong Jian wore an expression of utter helplessness. Brother Wang, you might have misunderstood. Wang Donglian and I are nothing at all, Fong Jian explained earnestly. Ah, I know. You're an ambitious man. You think Donglian's family background is too privileged, so you don't want to be with her, right? Fong Jian froze. What kind of logic was that? Why would having ambitions mean you couldn't date a rich woman? Truth be told, if it were the right fit, Fong Jian wouldn't mind living off someone else's money. Wang Tianpao lowered his voice. Let me tell you, I'd love to make it on my own merits, but there's no way around it. A family like this isn't something you can just walk away from. Fong Jian's mouth twitched. Are you showing off? Or just blind to how good he has it? Probably the latter, mostly. Bro, martial artists shouldn't be weighed down by so many worries, Wang Tianpao advised. Donglian is Donglian, and her family is her family. You shouldn't give it a second thought. Fong Jian thought for a moment and said, Brother Wang, you're right. Alright, I'll go get Donglian down for you. Fong Jian's eyes widened instantly. What did I just say? Wait, I don't care about Wang Donglian's family, I don't even care about her. Oh man, Brother Wang totally threw me off track. He tried to stop it, but it was clearly too late. Brother Fong, what brings you here? A delighted cry rang out as Wang Donglian came trotting down the path. After running in, she glanced at Wang Tianpao, covered her nose in disgust, and said, Brother, why are you drinking the moment you get back? You stink to high heaven. She grabbed Fong Jian's arm and pulled him away a bit, then called out, Don't drag Brother Fong into drinking with you, or you'll corrupt him too. Wang Tianpao was speechless, his face flushing even redder. What's going on? Why all the commotion? A leisurely voice drifted over. Then, an elderly woman dressed in traditional Chinese attire emerged. Her steps were slow, a cane in hand, suggesting some difficulty walking. Yet her eyes remained clear and sharp. Wang Donglian immediately released Fong Jian, went over to support her, and said, Grandma, look at brother. He comes home drunk and corrupts my friends. Wang Depeo nearly choked on his own blood. This sister wasn't even married yet. Damn it, no way. Absolutely not. Your friend, huh? The old lady looked up and turned her gaze toward Fong Jian. Fong Jian smiled faintly and said, Good day, madam. Visiting for the first time, he hadn't brought anything, which felt a bit rude. Good, good. What's the young man's name? The old lady asked with a warm smile. My name is Fong Jian. You can call me Xiao Fong. Fong Jian feared she might casually call him something like Xiao Jian, so he opted for a more familiar tone. Oh, so you're Xiao Fong. You certainly are a fine young man. The old lady's eyes lit up, clearly recognizing the name. Grandma, he's not just handsome, he's a real expert. Wang Tianpao boasted from the side. I fought him once and couldn't beat him. The old lady grew even more astonished. She looked at Fong Jian's straight, upright posture and asked, Xiao Fong, have you served in the military? Fong Jian shook his head slightly. No. No? Impossible. Wang Tianpao declared loudly. Brother, you must have served. That bearing, I'd recognize it with my eyes closed. Fong Jian smiled. Brother Wang, why would I lie to you? I truly haven't served. But during my school days, I underwent military training. I found it interesting, so I practiced in my spare time. Wang Tianpao's face froze in astonishment, his eyes wide with disbelief. That military bearing, that marching step. And he claimed he'd never served, learning it only during military training. Wang Tianpao couldn't believe it. Such precise marching steps couldn't possibly be mastered without formal instruction and constant practice. Sure, you can teach yourself anything. But could one really master military marching like this through self-study? Yet, seeing Fong Jian's calm demeanor, Wang Tianpao found himself involuntarily convinced. After all, why would he lie about something like this? Just investigate, and I guarantee you'll uncover everything. Wang Tianpao suddenly stepped forward, slung his arm around Fong Jian's shoulder and said, Brother, you're a natural-born soldier. Want to join the army? I can help you figure something out. Brother. Wang Donglian snapped angrily, could you stop saying things like that about everything? Brother Fong is past the age limit. He should have retired long ago. Wang Tianpao muttered, what's there to fear? We'll just create a special exemption document for him. Judging by his demeanor, he genuinely intended to persuade Fong Jian to join the military. Fong Jian wasn't opposed to joining the military. But he had too many things on his plate right now, he simply couldn't drop everything. Wang Donglian shot her brother a glare, then ignored him. Grandma, Brother Fong promised Han Mama he'd sing at the Shanghai Conservatory concert. He's a musician, after all. What's so great about being a musician? Wang Tianpao retorted. Little sister, let me tell you, being a soldier is the most honorable path. He suddenly slapped his forehead. Right. Brother, you could enlist as an artistic soldier. They have more lenient age requirements for that. Fong Jian waved his hands hastily. Brother Wang, thanks for the offer, but really, it's not necessary. Fong Jian didn't mind training at the barracks, but becoming an artistic soldier. No thanks. The old lady smiled gently. Alright, Tianpao, don't be so hard on him. Since Xiao Fang is here, don't be so formal. Come inside and sit down. Just as Fong Jian was about to refuse, he caught Wang Donglian's pitiful gaze fixed on him. He hesitated. Just then, Wang Tianpao grabbed his arm and said, Come on, let's go inside. Sleep it off, and I'll take you to the shooting range. Shooting practice? Fong Jian suddenly found himself rooted to the spot. Chapter 142, Shooting Club. After entering the house, Wang Tianpao went straight to lie down in his room. Though he claimed he'd be sober within an hour. Fong Jian, who had witnessed him down 2 bottles of baijiu, remained deeply skeptical. After taking her seat, the old lady didn't linger long. After a brief conversation, she instructed Wang Donglian to entertain the guests and retired for the night. Yet for some reason, Fong Jian couldn't shake the feeling that the old lady regarded him with a certain, peculiar gaze. Her gaze. Yes, it was her gaze. That look, it was somewhat like. Fong Jian glanced at Wang Donglian and asked, Little Wang, what did you say when you introduced me to the old lady? Wang Donglian replied with a smile, I spoke highly of you, of course. What else would I say? Fong Jian was utterly speechless. Thanks a lot, I really do. Wang Donglian suddenly leaned in, her eyes crinkling with a smile. Brother Fong, Little Wang sounds so old-fashioned. Just call me Little Lien. Fong Jian chuckled. Not really. That's too familiar. Poof. Wang Donglian's lips curled slightly as she murmured softly, Ruwei Jin. Ruwei Jin. Ruwei Jin. Fong Jian's heart sank. As the young girl's voice rose from low to high, it seemed to be growing louder and louder. He immediately asked, Xiaolian, what are you babbling about? As he spoke, he couldn't help but glance at those red lips that kept moving up and down. Oh, what a single misstep could lead to eternal regret. Would this weakness haunt him forever? Wang Donglian smiled contentedly. Brother Fong, you're going shooting later. I want to come too. Fong Jian's eyes darkened with suspicion. Put. What's that look on your face? Wang Donglian retorted indignantly. My marksmanship is definitely better than yours. Fong Jian quickly sat up straight, raised an eyebrow, and replied solemnly, not necessarily. Inside, he was secretly embarrassed. Damn it, what do young girls even learn these days? Wang Donglian's eyes twinkled. Brother Fong, let's make a bet. What? Let's go to the club and have a shooting contest. If you win, I'll grant you one wish. But if I win? No deal, Fong Jian replied without hesitation. What? You won't even hear the stakes? I don't want to deceive you, Fong Jian said earnestly. If I accepted a bet I knew I'd win, that would be taking advantage of you. Pointing to his heart, Fong Jian admitted honestly, my conscience just won't let me. You? Wang Donglian glared fiercely at Fong Jian, snorting softly. She resolved to teach him a lesson. She would show him what the marksmanship of a true heroine was all about. Fong Jian pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his feed. Though he had a stunning beauty beside him, he dared not make a move. To his surprise, Wang Donglian didn't insist on talking to him. Instead, she fetched a book from the study and simply sat beside him in the courtyard, quietly reading. Had Wang Donglian persistently chatted him up, Fong Jian might have already been nervously looking for an excuse to leave. But this quiet companionship made Fong Jian feel incredibly comfortable and at ease. Even if he wanted to make an excuse, he couldn't find one. An hour later, a resonant voice called out, Brother-in-law, I'm here. Wang Donglian flipped the pages of her book and said, Brother, don't talk nonsense. Wang Tianpao stepped forward, laughing heartily. Little sis, I don't recognize any other brothers-in-law besides Brother Fong. He placed his hands on his hips. I told you before, if you want to marry my sister, you have to beat me first. Brother Fong, you're the only one who's done it. Fong Jian froze, unsure how to address this. So the only requirement to become your brother-in-law is to beat you in a fight? That condition was indeed simple enough. But how many others besides himself could actually need it? Right, he had the Dark Force senior brother. Just as Fong Jian was lost in his thoughts, Wang Tianpao approached and said, Let's go to the shooting range. The shooting range? Fong Jian froze, surprised. Aren't we going to the barracks? Wang Tianpao roared with laughter. The barracks are too much hassle, all that paperwork. Start with the small stuff first. If you train well, I'll take you to play with the big guns later. Big guns? Fong Jian felt a faint tingle of unease. Forget it. He wanted to live a few more years. The three headed out, but this time Fang Jian wasn't driving. They climbed into Wang Donglian's Maserati and headed towards some destination. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Fang Jian glanced at the sleek, spacious facility, his eyes flickering slightly. There's a shooting range in Yong City too? I had no idea. A flicker of excitement stirred within him. He could definitely become a regular here. Wang Donglian smiled. It's members only, Brother Fang. I'll get you a membership card. Sure. Fang Jian had already been thinking about it. Wang Donglian seemed quite familiar with the place. As soon as she arrived, a coach approached them. This is my friend. He wants to get a membership and link it to mine. The instructor paused, glanced at Fang Jian, and quickly replied, sure thing. Just as Fang Jian was about to refuse, Wang Donglian interjected, my membership is special. You can play right away without waiting. Plus, you get access to several unique firearms. Hearing this, Fang Jian instantly abandoned his intention to refuse. When it came to shooting, the experience depended heavily on the weapon. Using a police-issue handgun versus a Thunder God pistol felt worlds apart. Fang Jian didn't expect them to have the Thor here, but he hoped they'd at least offer a few high-powered options. The instructor brought over a stack of documents, processed Fang Jian's membership card, and then explained some precautions and rules. This was a necessary process, as handling firearms was considered an extremely dangerous activity. Fang Jian listened attentively, showing no sign of impatience. Wang Tianpao nodded slightly beside him, giving his sister a thumbs up. It was unclear whether he was praising his sister's good judgment or reaffirming his satisfaction with Fang Jian. Soon, the group entered the shooting range. The layout resembled a bowling alley, with several shooting lanes. The instructor brought over 3 guns. Fang Jian glanced at them, all familiar, ones he'd handled many times before. Of course, that was in his dreams, not in reality. Brother-in-law. Fang Jian quickly interjected, Brother Wang, Xiaolian and I are just friends. Don't go pairing us up. Wang Tianpao stared at him, then sighed after a moment. Bro, you can't spoil women too much. Otherwise, what's the point of all that hard training? Fang Jian felt a wave of exasperation wash over him. So I train just to beat women? Wang Donglian sneered coldly, brother, you're right. I'll tell grandma and mom. Wang Tianpao visibly stiffened before saying, Brother Fang, come on over. Let me show you the firearms. Fang Jian had already understood from the instructor's earlier explanation. For regular members, only civilian firearms could be used at the shooting range. That meant small caliber air rifles and the like, with strict regulations on ammunition. BB pellets and paintballs were the most commonly used. However, because Wang Donglian's card was different, they could use police-grade, and even military-grade firearms. Bro, have you ever fired a gun before? Wang Tianpao asked in a low voice. You definitely have, right? Fang Jian paused, then asked, why do you say that? Ha, just standing there, I can tell you served in the military and you were a pretty good soldier. Soldiers? They've all fired guns. Fang Jian thought for a moment and laughed. Yeah, I have. Here, take this. Know what kind of gun this is? He handed over a pistol. It wasn't Wang Tianpao's first time holding a gun, but it was his first time shooting one with Fang Jian. Without knowing his background, it was only natural to start with ordinary firearms. Still, he trusted his judgment. Fang Jian wouldn't disappoint him. Sure enough, Fang Jian took the gun, gave it a few quick spins, and chuckled, M1911. Old but reliable. Chapter 143, Bullseye. 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 The M1911 pistol is a semi-automatic handgun chambered for .45 ACP ammunition, delivering substantial stopping power. Its iconic design remains an unmatched classic. Designed by American John Browning, it became the U.S. military standard-issue sidearm upon release and remained so for 74 years. Furthermore, it was widely adopted by armed forces worldwide, serving in active duty for over a century. It was an indispensable weapon on battlefields during World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Gulf War. You could always spot a formidable officer carrying an M1911 pistol. Wang Tianpao chuckled softly, then picked up an identical M1911. With lightning-fast hands, he swiftly disassembled the pistol into its component parts. After inspecting it, Wang Tianpao remarked, not bad. It's been maintained reasonably well. Gun oil and such have been applied. With that, he continued his work. Within a mere minute, the pistol was reassembled. Fang Jian watched silently, as did Wang Donglian. In that moment, the two seemed to reach an unspoken understanding. This guy must be crazy. They both knew Wang Tianpao was showing off his speed. Disassembling, maintaining, and reassembling firearms. These were essential skills for soldiers to master, but the level of proficiency varied from person to person. Wang Tianpao's speed wasn't the fastest, but it was certainly no slouch. Wang Donglian snorted lightly and said, Brother Feng, ignore him. He just lost the martial arts contest to you and is trying to make up for it in other ways. The smug look on Wang Tianpao's face instantly vanished. He snorted angrily, am I that petty? He shot his sister a glare before slipping on his earplugs, ready to begin shooting. Fang Jian and Wang Donglian exchanged a glance before putting theirs on as well. In this enclosed space, ear protection was mandatory when firing. Otherwise, the echoes here would teach you a lesson. Bang, bang, bang. Before long, Wang Tianpao finished his 10-shot burst. He had chosen the 50-meter distance. When the target was brought over, a hint of satisfaction flashed across his face as he saw the results. Out of 10 shots, only 1 hit the 7 ring, but 2 hit the 10 ring, with the rest landing in the 8 and 9 ring zones. While the score seemed average, considering the distance and Wang Tianpao's firing speed, it was actually quite impressive. Take the Olympics as an example. In the men's 50-meter slow-fire pistol event, competitors fire 60 rounds from a small-caliber pistol at a 50-meter target. Including sighting shots, the total time limit is 2 hours. That's a full 2 hours. In a real combat situation, by the time you finish aiming, the enemy might have already flown from the capital to Chengdu. Wang Tianpao sighed, soldiers shoot every day. I remember my old scores, 72 points out of 8 shots, plus 1 3-round burst, 1 2-round burst, and 3 single shots all hitting the bullseye. Today I drank, so my skills have deteriorated. He claimed to have regressed, but his swagger was so thick even a fool could sense it. Wang Donglian curled her lip and said, Brother Fang, look at him. That's just how he is. Fang Jian quickly laughed it off, saying, let me give it a shot. The siblings fell silent, both watching intently. Fang Jian picked up the pistol, mentally reviewing the technique brother Wu Jiangwo had taught him. Truthfully, the technique wasn't much different from Wang Tianpao's. He had disassembled countless firearms in his dreams, but this was his first time doing it in reality. Step by step, Fang Jian disassembled it correctly. His pace was slow, for after removing each part, he would examine it carefully, as if striving to etch its shape into his memory. It took a full 3 minutes before Fang Jian had disassembled the pistol into a pile of parts. Wang Tianpao exclaimed in surprise, Bro, is this your first time handling this gun? That seems unlikely. Fang Jian smiled. It really is my first time. I never used this model when I was shooting before. Ha! Fang Jian lowered his head, then suddenly reached out and began reassembling it. Click, click, click. A series of small clicks echoed in quick succession. Wang Tianpao and Wang Donglian's eyes widened simultaneously. They both suddenly felt as if they'd lived a lifetime in an instant. Because Fang Jian's speed was too fast. So fast, in fact, that they could barely keep up. In the blink of an eye, every single part on the table vanished. In Fang Jian's hands, however, now rested an M1911 pistol. Damn it, holy! Wang Tianpao exclaimed. How long did that take? How long did that assembly take just now? Wang Donglian opened her mouth and said, I didn't count, but it was definitely much faster than you. Wang Tianpao's eye twitched. Why the hell is she using me as an example again? You're becoming less and less adorable, little sister. Fang Jian smiled faintly as he loaded the bullets. Thanks to Wang Donglian's connections, he had access to real firearms. Seeing Fang Jian put on his ear protection, the other two quickly stepped back and donned their own earmuffs. The targets here were motorized as simple finger press automatically adjusted the distance. Pistol shooting competitions typically use distances of 10 meters, 25 meters, and 50 meters. These distances might sound short, but even hitting the bullseye worth 10 points in competition at 10 meters was incredibly difficult. Fang Jian, of course, wasn't arrogant. For his first pistol shot, he chose the 10-meter distance. His eyes narrowed slightly as he adopted the quickest standing shooting stance, following brother Wu Jiangwo's guidance. Bang! After aiming for a full 30 seconds, Fang Jian finally fired his first shot. 4 rings. The machine automatically announced the score. Wang Tianpao beside him let out an inexplicable sigh of relief. Fang Jian's speed in assembling the firearm had genuinely startled him. Deep down, he couldn't help but feel a bit resentful. If Fang Jian's martial arts skills surpassed his own, that might be understandable. After all, the country was vast and rich in resources, producing talents in abundance. Even among the common folk, hidden dragons and crouching tigers existed, and the occasional emergence of a dark force master was not entirely incomprehensible. But to suggest Fang Jian's marksmanship surpassed his own? That was something he found hard to stomach. Judging by Fang Jian's demeanor, he must have served in the military and undoubtedly is one of the elite. Yet marksmanship is a skill that demands relentless practice. Without ample ammunition, it's simply impossible to cultivate a marksman. Wang Tianpao might not be a sharpshooter, but he was confident he was at least a notch above Fang Jian. Sure enough, when he saw Fang Jian's first shot land only in the 4th ring, his face relaxed considerably. Fang Jian remained silent, continuing to aim. Every rifle has its own unique characteristics. Even firearms of the same model exhibit subtle differences when it comes to aiming. The firearms used by snipers are invariably those they personally carry and maintain. The same principle applied to the firearms used by athletes at the Olympic Games. That's the principle. Fang Jian's first shot was an experiment. It was his first shot with a handgun from the real world. His mind was as still as a pond, utterly focused. His martial arts training had reached a level where it gave him immense advantages in many situations. Just as now, when his focus was at its peak, adrenaline surged naturally. Fong Jian's mind was crystal clear. His eyes, hands, and heart seemed to reach an exquisitely subtle state of harmony in that instant. Transforming force. He had now entered the state of transforming force. Oh, and the gun in his hand. After the first test shot, Fong Jian's mind seemed to have firmly grasped it. Bang, bang, bang. 9 shots in rapid succession, with Fong Jian firing almost without pause at an average rate of 1 shot every 5 seconds. Bullseye, 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 bullseye. Wang Tianpao slowly raised his head, his gaze drifting from the scoring screen to the ceiling. His mind drifted into a daze. Damn it, I really drank too much today. I'm still hungover. Chapter 144, Transforming Force is the top-tier sniper's talent. As the target slowly approached, Wang Tianpao and his sister's eyes were glued to it, unable to look away. Especially Wang Tianpao, a seasoned gun enthusiast. He knew exactly what it meant to maintain such shooting precision under rapid-fire conditions. Of course, Fong Jian wasn't shooting from 50 meters this time, it was the closest range of 10 meters. Even so, such a feat was nothing short of astonishing. After all, averaging 1 shot every 5 seconds was truly demanding. For the average person, they probably wouldn't even be able to manage the recoil of the firearm. To say the least, Fong Jian's steadiness was nothing short of despair-inducing. Removing his ear muffs, Wang Tianpao asked slowly, "Brother, how did you manage that?" Fong Jian thought for a moment before replying, "It's simple. As long as you achieve unity between your eyes, mind, hands, body, and the gun, you'll hit the target." Wang Tianpao's face darkened. "I'm asking for your secret technique, and you're telling me some mystical nonsense? Is that appropriate? Everyone knows that the unity of eye, mind, hand, body, and rifle is the essential requirement for a top-tier sniper. But such talent isn't something everyone can possess." Fong Jian switched to a new target and continued firing. This time, he placed the target paper 50 meters away. Bang, bang, bang. Having grown familiar with his weapon, Fong Jian skipped the test firing process this time. Of course, the feel of a 50-meter distance was vastly different from 10 meters. Those with poor eyesight might not even make out the target paper. But as Fong Jian stood there, maintaining a steady composure, his heartbeat quickening slightly and adrenaline surging, that sense of man and weapon becoming one returned once more. This did not mean Fong Jian's body had transformed into the firearm. Rather, in this state, he seemed to experience an illusion. The distance between myself and the target seemed to shrink. That 50-meter gap seemed to vanish entirely. It felt as though I stood directly before the target. All I had to do was raise my weapon, and it would press against the paper. This sensation was truly uncanny. Could shooting with transformed energy truly produce such a miraculous effect? In that instant, Fong Jian's mind raced with thoughts. During the Republic era, legends abounded of sharpshooters. Those tales painted their marksmanship as nothing short of supernatural, utterly unbelievable. If such sharpshooters truly existed, wouldn't they effortlessly sweep several gold medals at the Olympics? He had always assumed these were merely artistic exaggerations. But at this very moment, a new theory began to form in his mind. Perhaps those legendary marksmen were martial artists who had mastered the art of transforming force, only to change careers. 10 rings, 10 rings, 10 rings. The screen continued to display perfect tens, and this time it was 10 perfect tens in a row. When the target was returned, Wang Tianpao's eyes grew unfocused. Fong Jian smiled and said, "I'd like to try the rifle." "Sure thing," Wang Donglian replied without hesitation. "I'll set it up for you." Rifles came in many models, but the selection here was limited. Fong Jian glanced at the descriptions and selected the Jianshi EM332A 5.6mm bolt-action rifle. This rifle, manufactured by Chongqing Jianshi Industrial Company in China, was primarily designed for hunting and shooting competitions. Its sleek profile and feel were strikingly similar to the 98K rifle from the game PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Fong Jian's preference for domestic products overrode all else. Between this rifle and the Luger and Baikal models, he chose the former. Rifle shooting involves 3 positions. In Olympic competition, the 50mm small-bore standard rifle event requires shooting 20 rounds each in prone, standing, and kneeling positions at a 50-meter target, with a total time limit of 2 hours and 15 minutes including trial shots. Among these 3 positions, the prone position is the easiest to learn and master. The prone position allows for shooting preparation under relatively stable conditions. When adjusting the prone position, the shooter lies almost flat on the ground with both elbows supporting the body. The support surface formed by the prone position is much larger than that of the standing or kneeling positions. The combined center of gravity of the firearm and body is lower, giving the entire posture excellent stability. During defensive combat on the battlefield, prone shooting is frequently observed. This is done to maximize accuracy. The standing position has the highest center of gravity and smallest support surface. Maintaining this posture relies primarily on skeletal support and muscle tension. This characteristic of the standing position forces the shooter into an unnatural, asymmetrical posture, significantly altering the normal distribution of muscle load. Therefore, while it allows for the fastest firing speed, it offers the least stability. In the kneeling position, the shooter rests the right knee on the ground, arches the back, and shifts the body's center of gravity near the legs. When firing, the left elbow cannot be tightly pressed against the body and lacks a fixed support, making it difficult to achieve close integration between the shooter and the weapon. However, in practice, accuracy is slightly higher than in the standing position. Fang Jian's first unrestricted shooting session sparked his interest. He tried all three stances one after another. Thus, the shooting range echoed with a continuous series of bang, bang, bang. During the session, the shooting instructor grew concerned and came over to check on him. Shooting, though performed while standing still, is an extremely energy-consuming activity. Additionally, each shot produced significant recoil. For a novice, firing all day would leave them unable to lift their arms the next day. That's why the instructor came over to check on the situation. But when he saw Fang Jian's shooting results, he was instantly speechless. Instead, he stood silently watching, his eyes seemingly glowing with admiration. Fang Jian switched to another rifle and fired a full 200 rounds before finally feeling satisfied. When his scores were announced, the three observers felt a bit numb. Except for the few shots during the test firing, every single one of his remaining shots landed squarely in the bullseye. A perfect 10 every single time. Staring at the stack of targets, the shooting instructor remarked with admiration, "Brother, are you on the national team? I don't recall ever hearing of you before." Fang Jian smiled faintly. "Don't laugh at me. I'm not on the shooting team." The coach scrutinized Fang Jian from head to toe, then suddenly realized, "I get it, you're an elite sniper in the military, right?" Fang Jian chuckled helplessly and shook his head. But the coach remained unconvinced. He solemnly assured him, "Bro, don't worry. I know the rules. I'll keep this confidential. I won't say a word. Oh, and by the way, whenever you come back, just look for me. I'll give you half price. Here, bullets cost 20 yuan each." Fang Jian alone had fired 200 rounds, and with Wang Tianpao's rounds added, that came to nearly 5,000 yuan. That discount was truly substantial. Fang Jian couldn't refuse and accepted the offer. After seeing Fang Jian's impressive score, Wang Tianpao and his sister lost all interest in shooting. As they left, Wang Donglian glanced at Fang Jian and sighed softly, finally understanding why he had refused her bet. Once in the car, Wang Tianpao couldn't hold back any longer. "Bro, when did you get your hands on a gun?" Fang Jian thought for a moment before replying, "During military training. We had a target practice session on the last day, 5 rounds per person." "Military training? Target practice?" Wang Tianpao looked utterly astonished. "Yeah," Fang Jian replied with a smile. "How is that possible?" Wang Tianpao's face flushed crimson with excitement, as if the alcohol hadn't yet worn off. Seeing Wang Tianpao's expression, Fang Jian said seriously, "Brother Wang, you practice martial arts too? If one day you reach the stage of internal power transformation, you might understand." "Hua Jin?" Wang Tianpao's expression changed dramatically. "Brother, you've reached Hua Jin?" Fang Jian chuckled. "Pretty much." Wang Tianpao's mouth fell open, his face frozen in utter shock. Even witnessing Fang Jian hit 10 bullseyes in succession earlier hadn't stirred such intensity. Chapter 145, Attaining the Transformation Force. The next morning, Fang Jian rose early. He made his way to the Riverside Park. Winter had arrived, and the morning air was bitterly cold. Though a few elderly people still exercised early in the park, they were now extremely rare. Most of the elderly were bundled up in padded cotton jackets or thick-down coats. The main reason these seniors exercised early was that they had light sleep. Once awake with nothing to do, they came to the park to alleviate their loneliness. Just look around. If they had grandchildren to care for at home, which elderly person would be up at dawn running around the park? Thus, at this hour, the park, especially the one near the river, grows increasingly deserted. Fang Jian stood in the park, silently gazing at the river's surface ahead. His mind, however, kept revisiting the sensation he felt in that split second when he fired the gun yesterday. Fang Jian was right about Wang Tianpao. The reason he could maintain such pinpoint accuracy, hitting the bullseye every single time at such a rapid pace? It was because of the transformation of force. At the moment he fired, his body was in a state of transformed energy. This wasn't a sudden surge to this realm, but a sustained, prolonged maintenance of it. His mind was still as water. The emotional fluctuations and surges of mental energy were nowhere near as intense as when he first grasped the concept of hidden force, and the adrenaline released followed suit. Yet, it was precisely this sustained state of low-frequency emotional fluctuation that dramatically extended the duration of his mental focus and adrenaline release. Fang Jian understood this as his control over his body had finally reached a point where his thoughts manifested effortlessly. The essence of hidden force lies in instantaneous, explosive power. A single punch unleashed with dark force struck like an iron fist. Even a peak practitioner of light force would be forced to kneel upon encountering its impact. Forget hitting a person, even striking wood or stone would cause internal fractures and damage. In other words, even if you wore body armor, a single strike might leave the armor intact but would wreak havoc on your internal organs. However, the human body has its limits. Even at the height of his power, how many hidden force punches could Master Li Shuwen possibly deliver? After all, humans are not machines. Every hidden force punch demands a powerful burst of mental energy and a massive surge of adrenaline, placing an enormous strain on the body. If every punch were delivered with hidden force, one might collapse from exhaustion before even reaching the target. At this stage, martial artists no longer pursue purely greater destructive power. After mastering the hidden force, the martial artist's focus shifts to control. Perfect mastery. When transforming force, they can channel power to every extremity of their body. Not even the hair or nails are exempt. Moreover, they can sustain this state for extended periods. This is the true essence of transforming force. With a mind as still as water, the slightest emotional fluctuation triggers mental focus and adrenaline, keeping the body in a semi-superhuman state. This was Fang Jian's understanding of transforming force. At the moment the gun fired, Fang Jian's eyes, mind, hands, body, and weapon became one. It was a further elevation of his intent, finally allowing him to take the final step in mastering the transformation of force. Now, facing the biting wind, Fang Jian suddenly opened his mouth and exhaled. As waves of heat flowed from his body, he assumed a stance and began his boxing form. Ba Guizhang is renowned throughout the world for its fierce and powerful techniques. Yet, though the form Fang Jian practiced now followed Ba Guizhang's patterns, his movements carried an added subtlety, a hidden sharpness with an apparent softness. Moreover, his movements were deliberately slow, appearing far more like a performance than actual combat. If any outsider had witnessed this moment, they would surely declare it authentic Tai Chi. From Ba Guizhang to Tai Jiquan. The magnitude of this transformation could only be described as earth-shattering. Yet to Fang Jian himself, the sensation was crystal clear and distinct. Waves of vital energy flowed through his body, coursing to every limb and bone. Infinite joy surged within Fang Jian's heart. Transforming force. With this realization, Fang Jian had finally taken the final step in mastering the transformation of force. He withdrew his fist. His body trembled slightly. Swish, swish, swish. His body seemed to emit muffled thuds, while the air around him rippled with imperceptible vibrations invisible to the naked eye. Fang Jian tilted his head back to gaze at the sky, feeling the rising sun's beauty beyond description. Back home, Fang Jian rummaged through the refrigerator and pulled out the dishes he'd bought and stored the day before. He whipped up a delicious meal for himself in no time. The portion size was significantly larger than usual. Fang Jian knew that after mastering the art of internal force, his appetite would inevitably increase significantly. If he had been a glutton before, now he was heading toward becoming a bottomless pit. The stronger the body, the more energy it consumed, demanding greater replenishment. The more formidable the ancient warrior, the more he ate. Just like modern engines, the more powerful the drive, the more fuel it consumed. Fortunately, Fang Jian was now wealthy. Otherwise, he might not have been able to afford to feed himself. Just as he finished eating, Zhang Tao's call came through. "Bro, are you interested in Italy?" Fang Jian paused slightly, staring at the phone in his hand as countless questions flooded his mind. "Italy? Zhang Tao, what's up? Spit it out." "Alright, Milan, Italy, the international fashion capital. You know it, right?" "Of course I know. It was the first stop on your honeymoon with your wife." Zhang Tao's frustrated voice came through the receiver. "Exactly. I booked your flights and hotel. We'll go together." Fang Jian's brow furrowed slightly. What was he doing tagging along to their wedding? For some reason, a vague sense of unease and worry settled in his heart. "Who else is coming?" Fang Jian asked, clinging to a sliver of hope. "Who else could it be?" "Of course, your two big lightbulbs in Chi Yue." Fang Jian thought to himself, just as I suspected. "Hey, Zhang Tao, I'm not getting involved in this. I'm not going." If it were just Luan Wani going, Fang Jian would be quite interested. But two girls together? No, three. He'd just be tagging along as a bag carrier. Zhang Tao chuckled. "Fang Jian, I hear things aren't exactly peaceful overseas these days. I can protect my wife, but those three girls. Oh my, what if they go out to bars at night and can't find their way back? Or get mugged on the way? Or drugged?" "Enough," Fang Jian sighed helplessly. "Can't you be a little more spirited?" "Put." Zhang Tao snapped back. "If it were you, suddenly turning your honeymoon into a shopping tour, would you be thrilled?" Fang Jian nearly burst out laughing. But he knew that if he laughed now, this guy would definitely flip out. "Fine, I'll go with you once," Fang Jian mused. "Actually, I need to go to Austria anyway. Going via Italy should be faster, right?" If Zhang Tao hadn't invited him, Fang Jian wouldn't have known when he'd find the time to go to Austria and search for those bearer bonds. But since he had the chance to go to Europe, he might as well take care of it while he was there. "Austria?" Zhang Tao asked in surprise. "What are you going there for?" "A friend left something there. I need to retrieve it." Zhang Tao looked utterly baffled, but since Fang Jian had agreed, he didn't press the matter further. It was just Austria, after all. Their honeymoon didn't have a fixed destination anyway, so a trip there wouldn't hurt. Come to think of it, what kind of sights does Austria have? Zhang Tao hung up and started researching travel guides. But just as Fang Jian put his phone down, it rang again. He answered, and Liang Chao's excited voice came through. "Boss, those influencers interviewed Su Qing's mom and wife. The online narrative is starting to shift." Chapter 146, The Turnaround. Listening to Liang Chao's words, Fang Jian felt not a ripple of emotion. He gave a brief acknowledgement and hung up. He had instructed Liang Chao to find a few internet celebrities. The kind who'll stoop to anything for views. The wave after wave of such influencers had been exposed. There will always be those willing to resort to any means for fame. So finding similar ones was a piece of cake. Once the target is identified, pose as a fan to chat with them and leak the scoop. That basketball prodigy who got tripped but walked away unscathed, only to end up injuring someone else, turns out he's a gun-toting bully who beats women. This news is absolutely explosive, brimming with drama and unexpected twists. What do online audiences crave most? Celebrity gossip? Wrong. What netizens truly crave are stories with twists. Especially when certain popular celebrities do something that contradicts their public persona, it's guaranteed to be sensationalized and spread like wildfire. So twists and turns are what people love to see most. Since they've made it as internet celebrities, they naturally know how to capitalize on trending topics. And if that trend comes with intense drama and unexpected twists, these influencers will flock to it like bees to honey. Upon hearing such explosive news, they immediately rushed to Su Qing's home without delay. As for where Su Qing lived, well, that information came courtesy of his so-called helpful neighbors. And so, one meticulously crafted video after another came into being. Fang Jian opened the link Liang Chao had sent and began watching. Inside were two women, Su Qing's mother and wife, who tearfully denounced in the video how despicable and brazen Fang Jian had been. He actually assaulted someone inside the courthouse. He even knocked out one of the woman's teeth. Yet after the assault, Fang Jian walked out of the courthouse unabashedly, without any compensation or consequences. After the two women finished speaking, the internet celebrity stepped forward. He sternly declared that such behavior was illegal. Moreover, assaulting a woman was utterly immoral. He questioned why the assailant could walk free from the courthouse without facing punishment. Nevertheless, he vowed to keep monitoring the situation and provide updates as developments unfolded. It must be said that his team members possess considerable skill in cinematography, which is no small feat for someone who has become an internet celebrity. Not only did the video feature well-chosen locations, but the color grading and soundtrack. Indeed, they even added background music during the narration, making the influencer's voice sound passionate and more compelling. In short, anyone who watched this video would form a preconceived notion. That is, this Fang Jian actually beats women and does so in a sacred place like a courtroom. Such a person must be utterly depraved. So, countless people gave it a thumbs up, and even more left comments. In the comments section, a lawyer even stated outright, knocking out one tooth during a fight is illegal, while knocking out two or more constitutes a criminal offense. According to regulations, breaking or knocking out one tooth during a fight constitutes minor injury, warranting administrative penalties. Breaking or knocking out two or more teeth constitutes minor injury, which is a criminal offense of intentional assault, subject to criminal liability. This lawyer expressed willingness to provide them with legal aid free of charge, no less. Fang Jian glanced at it and shook his head slightly. This lawyer was clearly desperate for fame. In this society, most industries have become increasingly rigid, with few avenues for upward mobility. The legal profession is no exception. With senior lawyers dominating the field, junior lawyers face immense difficulty in making a name for themselves. Many who practice law for several years eventually choose to switch careers. Yet some lawyers resort to desperate measures to gain notoriety. The surest path to fame is taking on high-profile cases. Once they make a name for themselves, it's like leaping through the Dragon Gate. They'll start earning six figures and win the life of a rich, beautiful woman. Since the emergence of the free throw line dunk and stepping on the foot injury incidents online, the buzz has remained relentless, long since breaking out of niche circles. Now, a sudden twist has emerged. It instantly ignited public outrage, and it's no wonder some are jumping on the bandwagon. Fang Jian believed the likelihood of this lawyer acting out of righteous indignation was practically zero. Putting down his phone, Fang Jian ignored it. This controversy was actually something he had instructed Liang Chao to stir up. But once it was stirred up, he washed his hands of it. Because he knew countless opportunists online would ride the wave, amplifying the incident to its absolute peak. He made a trip to the boxing club. Coach Fang Jian trained Liang Chao for a while. He'd done so much for me, if not for his achievements, then for his hard work, and deserved some reward. During training, Liang Chao showed remarkable willingness to endure hardship and fearlessness toward pain. Even when beaten black and blue by Fang Jian, he gritted his teeth and persevered. That fierce determination pleased Fang Jian immensely. If someone whined and complained after just a few hits, they'd be better off not learning martial arts at all. In contrast, Fang Jian's own demeanor when he first encountered Master Li Shuwen. The past was too painful to recall, so he'd leave it at that. It could be said that without the experience and transformation of retracing the Red Road, Fang Jian would never have caught Master Li Shuwen's eye. Had Fang Jian displayed Liang Chao's current resolve back then, he might have become a disciple long ago. After finishing their martial arts training, Fang Jian motioned for him to get in the car. Following their midday meal, he tossed him a backpack. Liang Chao opened it, then snapped it shut as if it were scalding hot. "Master, what's this for?" "It's yours." "I don't want it," Liang Chao protested, his face flushing red. "I haven't even spent all the money you gave me last time." "Idiot," Fang Jian scolded. "Look closely." Liang Chao paused, reopening the backpack. Only then did he notice a piece of paper tucked beneath the stack of bills. Pulling it out and glancing at it, Liang Chao's eyes lit up. It was a recipe for medicinal cuisine and a formula for a medicinal bath. To train in martial arts, your body must be well nourished. Also, physical training can cause hidden injuries. Before you master the art of redirecting force, the best remedy is to soak in a medicinal bath, Fang Jian said calmly. Liang Chao looked up abruptly. "Master, thank you." His heart surged with emotion, for he understood that receiving these two prescriptions signified Fang Jian's recognition of him. If he had previously been treated as a nominal disciple, now he was officially an initiated disciple. Fang Jian spoke slowly. "These herbs aren't cheap. The money is for you to buy them." He stood up and said, "Remember, train diligently, but also with moderation. Build steadily and firmly. Don't rush for quick results, but don't slack off either." "Yes, master. You're no longer a beginner. I've taught you the principles, but whether you succeed depends entirely on you." Master Fang's voice grew solemn. "In 1 month, I will test you. If you fail to satisfy me, or if you injure yourself in training, you may no longer call me master." Liang Chao nodded vigorously. He understood this was Master Fang Jian's initiation test. Success meant becoming a true disciple, receiving the authentic teachings. But if he failed, he would forever remain only a nominal disciple. Fang Jian smiled, rose, and departed. That evening, they arrived at the music restaurant. The professors and students from the Shanghai Conservatory of Music had already returned after attending the wedding and rehearsal. They had their own work commitments. Being able to spare 2 days over the weekend was already a significant gesture of respect toward Chao Qingxin. Thus, everything returned to normal. Cai Yuyi was responsible for playing the piano in the restaurant today. Fang Jian treated her to a meal, then volunteered to play 3 pieces. Though they were all old songs, they still earned thunderous applause and a hefty tip. He seemed completely unaffected, going about his day with calm composure. Chapter 147, Beyond Huatian lies Danjin. Late at night, Fang Jian felt someone approaching him in his drowsy state. Without even opening his eyes, he knew it was his father. "Dad, I'm here. Find me a few teachers." Fang Jian opened his eyes and said cheerfully. His father shot him a glare. Teachers, you're always looking for teachers. Why don't you hurry up and get married instead?" Fang Jian quickly explained, "Dad, I'm looking for teachers this time specifically to find a wife." "Huh? What do you mean?" "That kid Zhan Tao is going abroad for his honeymoon, and your daughter-in-law is going with him. I thought, going together would be so romantic. Maybe something could happen along the way, don't you think?" Right. His father nodded repeatedly, chuckling, "You're a clever one, son. You've got your old man's flair." Fang Jian inwardly scoffed, but outwardly said, "So, I want to learn a few foreign languages to make communication easier." "Sounds good." Dad agreed, then paused. "How many?" "This time we're traveling to Europe. You know how many countries there are, and the languages are all over the place. I need to learn a few more." His father pondered for a moment before saying, "All right. If it's just a regular teacher, it shouldn't be too expensive." At the boundary between the living and the dead, all beings' ghosts included communicated through soul consciousness when imparting skills, though they spoke with their voices. This effectively avoided the pitfalls of language barriers or misunderstandings. Although this place possessed the unique property of time being as precious as gold, Fang Jian's rapid learning was also greatly influenced by this method of teaching through soul communication. However, once Fang Jian left this place, what he couldn't understand remained incomprehensible. Therefore, if he wished to comprehend figures like Beethoven, Pavarotti, Maradona, or Kobe in the outside world, he would have to learn their languages. Not through soul-to-soul connection, but through the actual spoken language. So, which languages do you want to learn? Fang Jian had looked it up before bed tonight. German is Austria's official language. However, if you're fluent in English, you can generally get by just fine in Austria. But Fang Jian had bigger ambitions, so he wanted to learn several more. "Dad, I want to learn English, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Arabic. Oh, and add Japanese and Korean to the list too." His father's face darkened slightly. He was calculating how much money he would have left after his son finished learning all 10 languages. Assuming 1 language per day, that would be 365 million. And that didn't include the cost of hiring tutors. But upon reflection, it wasn't too bad. 10 languages would cost just over 3.6 billion yuan, still within his budget. Sighing in slight relief, Dad said, "Son, while you're out this time, bring back that registered stock certificate. Getting more cash is always good." Fang Jian chuckled, "Dad, it's a registered stock. Ah, who cares what kind of stock it is? As long as it can be cashed in. Fong Jian looked surprised. Dad, you're not short on cash again, are you? Not now, but it's better to be prepared, Dad said solemnly. You'll be getting married and having kids. Isn't it wise to build up some savings? Yes. I'll listen to you. Fong Jian wisely dropped the subject immediately, knowing his father could drone on all night otherwise. Dad looked up and said, let me show you the teacher you need. Dad, wait a minute, Fong Jian hurriedly interjected. Today or tomorrow, you need to bring my master here. I want to learn the craft from him. Father nodded with satisfaction. That's acceptable. A strong body is the most important thing. With that, he manipulated the controls. Then, Fong Jian watched as Master Li Shuwen stepped in from outside the circle. Moments later, the old man departed. Li Shuwen looked at Fong Jian, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Fong Jian, have you mastered the transformative force? Yes, master. Come, let's spar. Though everyone here existed as spirits, Fong Jian possessed a physical body. Therefore, the limits he could demonstrate were those imposed by his flesh. Li Shuwen, however, faced no such limitations. Any realm he had ever attained, he could effortlessly replicate. Of course, without a physical body, even Li Shuwen could only maintain his peak cultivation level. To advance further was utterly impossible. Fong Jian's fist techniques in this clash with Li Shuwen differed vastly from his previous encounter. When he threw a punch, power surged through his entire body. Yet, while the force exerted in each strike was tenfold, the latent power contained within reached 12-fold. Each punch appeared to be delivered with full force, yet it was like a needle hidden in cotton, power contained but not released. When he missed his target, he expended almost no energy at all. Moreover, due to the latent force coursing through his entire body. Thus, every bone and joint in his limbs became a lethal weapon capable of unleashing the power of hidden force, multiplying his lethality exponentially. Li Shuwen blocked and parried while silently nodding in approval. Indeed, this young disciple had mastered the art of transforming force. And he hadn't misjudged the boy. After sensing Fong Jian's spiritual elevation, he knew Fong Jian would surely reach the realm of transformed force. He just hadn't expected this day to arrive so swiftly. Moments later, both men withdrew their hands. A true exchange between martial arts masters was inherently perilous. Victory or defeat, life or death, could often be decided within mere minutes. This was because the human body could only endure so much force. When explosive power surged, it caused blood and chi to violently churn, inflicting severe damage on the body. If the fight dragged on too long, neither fighter would be able to kill the other, they would simply exhaust themselves to death first. Though physical constraints did not exist in this place, both combatants understood this truth. Moreover, the mind too would grow weary. It's just that the recovery speed is incredibly fast. Fong Jian, how did you master the art of transforming force? Li Shuwen asked curiously. Your progress in training is far faster than I imagined. Fong Jian didn't hide anything, recounting his insights gained from studying singing with Pavarotti and from firing a gun. Li Shuwen listened with rapt attention, his jaw dropping slightly. For their generation of martial artists, after mastering hidden force, the next step was to refine the body. They trained their internal organs, using water grinding techniques to circulate the hidden force throughout their entire bodies. Even in that era of relentless warfare, when human life was as cheap as a dog's, completing this stage demanded an immense amount of time. At a minimum, it took several years, at most, over a decade. Many who had mastered the hidden force found themselves stalled at this very stage. They wasted over a decade, their vitality waning until they could never overcome this barrier. Yet even so, no one had ever taken a shortcut like Fong Jian, using singing to comprehend the transformation of force, and he had actually stumbled upon it by accident. While his ultimate success was tied to his state of mind during the shooting, Li Shuwen judged that this final step merely served as the icing on the cake. The true crux lay in the ingenious method of singing to stir emotions and sustain a vibrant, focused state of mind. After deep contemplation, Li Shuwen sighed deeply. It must be said that people are always progressing. Modern society offers access to so many things, drawing connections between them often yields unexpected gains. Li Shuwen gathered his thoughts and said, very well. Since you have mastered the transformation of force, you have achieved the goal I set for you. Fong Jian exclaimed joyfully, Master, does this mean I can proceed to the next stage of cultivation? Indeed. Beyond Huatan lies an even greater step, Danjing. Li Shuwen's expression grew solemn. As the Taoists say, when the golden elixir enters the belly, my fate is mine alone, not heaven's. Should you master Danjing, your physical capabilities will shatter human limits. The world will be yours to traverse. Chapter 148, the video was deleted. The next morning, Fong Jian had just finished his exercises. He received the call he'd been hoping for from attorney Shang Jinrui. Good morning, Mr. Fong, Shang Jinrui's voice carried a hint of resignation. Are you available now? I'd like to pay you a visit. Fong Jian smiled faintly, fully aware of her purpose. Attorney Shang, what brings you here? Mr. Fong, it's like this: a video has suddenly gone viral online, and it's having a significant impact on your reputation. A video? Let me take a look first. Moments later, Fong Jian called her back. Attorney Shang, they're twisting the truth. It's outrageous. Yes, it is, Shang Jinrui replied perfunctorily, though inwardly she was seething. Honestly, you're already so wealthy, why be so stubborn? Last time, if you'd just been straightforward and offered some compensation, it wouldn't have escalated to this point. Sigh, the mindset of the wealthy is truly baffling. Yet she could never have imagined. The mastermind behind this whole affair was none other than her own employer. Moreover, Fong Jian's true objective was far beyond anything she could have imagined. Fong Jian continued, Attorney Shang, how about this? I'll treat you and my cousin to lunch. Please let my cousin know we'll meet at the same restaurant as before. Shang Jinrui's brow furrowed slightly. Having lunch together wasn't a problem, and the location, that music restaurant, was a place she liked. But bringing Fong Xiaohua along? Ah well, Fong Xiaohua was Fong Jian's relative after all. Bringing him along might help persuade him. After hanging up, Shang Jinrui considered messaging Fong Xiaohua on WeChat, but after a moment's thought, she got up and decided to visit him in person. Mr. Fong, are you free for lunch? Shang Jinrui asked with a smile. Fong Xiaohua's eyes lit up. Of course I'm free. Absolutely free. Would you be willing to accompany me to meet a client? Sure, I'd be happy to help, Fong Xiaohua laughed. Which client? Is he difficult? Yes, very difficult, the kind with deep pockets. Fong Xiaohua's expression shifted slightly. Has he been harassing you? Shang Jinrui paused, then said with a mix of amusement and exasperation, What are you thinking? That's your brother, Fong Jian. Oh, is he difficult? Fong Xiaohua looked utterly bewildered. Yeah. Your brother's lawsuit, it could have been settled with a little compensation, but he insisted on going to court. What else would you call that but troublesome? Fong Xiaohua finally understood. He chuckled, maybe it's just youthful stubbornness. He couldn't let it go. What kind of flowers does your brother sell that he's so wealthy? Shang Jinrui asked with a sigh. Well, Fong Xiaohua felt a twinge of discomfort. He really didn't want to tell her that Fong Jian actually sold funeral wreaths and memorial goods. Ahem, well, my brother also deals in gold. That's probably what makes him. Ha? You said he's particularly wealthy? What do you mean? You didn't know? I thought he'd told you. Shang Jinrui paused, then said after a moment's thought, a few days ago, the company received a 1 million yuan payment. It was from your brother. He said it was all for legal fees in a lawsuit, with the stipulation that he wouldn't pay a single penny in damages. 1 million, in cash? Fong Xiaohua was genuinely taken aback. After the last gathering, he knew Fong Jian was more powerful than he'd initially estimated. But the idea that he could casually pull out 1 million in cash for legal fees was something he'd never imagined. Could the gold business really be that lucrative? Yes, it was him. Fong Xiaohua paused for a moment before suddenly laughing. Since he's paying, what are you worried about? Just do as he asks. Shang Jinrui gave a wry smile. Well, I just feel a bit embarrassed about such a minor matter. If I keep dragging this out, people will say I'm deliberately trying to rip off the client. Ha! Don't worry. With me vouching for you, it'll be fine. Fong Xiaohua assured her confidently. Shang Jinrui shook her head. Now a new complication has arisen. It's getting messy. Moments later, after watching the video, Fong Xiaohua also fell silent. What do you plan to do? Let's meet with him first thing at noon today. All right. At noon, when Fong Jian arrived at the music restaurant, the two lawyers were already waiting there. Seeing Fong Jian arrive, Fong Xiaohua first nodded toward him, then winked, approaching with a broad smile and whispering, Brother, thanks. He understood perfectly well that he was actually superfluous at today's meal. But Fong Jian had seen his desire to pursue Shang Jinrui, so he deliberately made excuses to create an opportunity for him. He was confident he would ultimately win the beauty's heart. But he certainly wouldn't turn down any extra chances. Mr. Fong, have you seen the video? Shang Jinrui asked. Fong Jian replied, I have. He adopted an indignant expression, this is slander. I'm going to sue them. Shang Jinrui gave a bitter smile. Mr. Fong, these internet celebrities aren't afraid of trouble. In fact, the bigger the fuss, the higher their traffic and the happier they are. Oh, so disregarding the facts is acceptable? Heh, Mr. Fong, look at their stance. They only broadcast footage of two women making accusations while feigning outrage. Even if we sue, we can only pursue charges against those two women for defamation. The influencers could easily claim they were deceived and are victims themselves. Shang Jinrui looked at Fong Jian with evident frustration. Fong Jian frowned deeply. So you're saying there's nothing we can do? There is. We can go to court. Shang Jinrui said solemnly, fortunately, you had the foresight to record it last time. Those recordings should still be preserved in the court archives. As long as we can obtain them, we can make them public. Then, if anyone still tries to make trouble, we can sue them according to the law. Alright, let's head to the court this afternoon, Fang Jian said with a smile. But this isn't a major issue. Let's eat first. Soon, the steaks arrived, and the three of them dug in heartily. That afternoon, they went together to the district court. Truthfully, this matter had little to do with Fang Xiaohua. He could have easily stayed out of it. But he insisted on tagging along, claiming he was Fang Jian's relative. As for what he was truly thinking, only he knew. Upon arriving at the district court, they quickly made contact with Judge Yao, who had presided over the case that day. Although the court was a solemn and dignified place, the judges still valued human relationships. Truthfully, among the myriad cases that came before the court, truly major or high-profile cases were extremely rare. Many cases were the kind that could be settled privately. What judges actually deal with day in and day out are mostly these trivial, petty matters. When such cases arise, judges also hope both parties can resolve matters privately. This isn't because they're shirking their duties, but rather to preserve harmony. Because once a ruling is made, the outcome is often mutually detrimental, potentially sowing the seeds for greater conflicts down the line. Take the simplest example. Car accidents. Of course, Fang Jian's case was somewhat different. After hearing Shang Jinrui's request, Judge Yao said, "Please wait a moment while I look into this." He returned shortly, expressing regret. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly sorry, but there's nothing we can do to assist in this matter." "How can that be?" Shang Jinrui exclaimed in surprise. "Wasn't that footage confiscated by the court? If it's released, my client won't face any further attacks." Judge Yao shrugged his shoulders. "Attorney Shang, you're a legal professional too. You know it's not permitted to take photos or videos inside the court. What they did that day was considered covert filming. So after we seized the camera, we proceeded to delete the footage." "Deleted?" "Yes. It was in accordance with regulations. We never imagined this would happen. I apologize." Chapter 149, Another Twist. Shang Jinrui and Fang Xiaohua exchanged glances. Both felt a twinge of displeasure, yet they understood this matter truly left no room to blame the other party. After all, secretly filming inside the courthouse was indeed illegal. However, without that footage, Fang Jian would have faced serious trouble. Therefore, the authorities had merely confiscated the equipment without detaining anyone, a significant show of leniency. Fang Jian suddenly spoke up. "Judge Yao, you were also a party involved that day. And I recall quite a few people saw the footage. Might I arrange for someone to interview you about what happened that day?" He smiled. Of course, it would be even better if we could get more parties involved to share their accounts. Judge Yao stared at him silently for a long moment before replying, "Mr. Fang, I'm sorry, but I cannot do that." "Why not?" "Because of my position," Judge Yao replied solemnly. "Without permission from my superiors, I cannot accept interviews." Fang Jian looked surprised. "Is that a rule?" "Yes," Fang Xiaohua interjected from the side. "Judges are prohibited from disclosing any case-related information to the media without the consent of the parties involved and the approval of their superiors." "This is a case?" "Absolutely," Fang Xiaohua replied with a sigh. "And those two women definitely won't agree to go public." Fang Jian glanced at Judge Yao and noticed a faint, cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That smile seemed to hold a hint of faint disdain. He suddenly understood. After Sun Qing's family filed the appeal, Judge Yao had handled it with remarkable efficiency and speed. Though his words today were flawlessly polished, with so many coincidences aligning, Fang Jian couldn't help but suspect something fishy was afoot. He chuckled dryly. "Judge Yao, if that's the case, then so be it. We'll find another way. At worst, it'll just be a war of words." He paused. "Oh, and since the recording has been deleted, shouldn't the equipment seized last time be returned to us?" "Oh, that. Certainly. But please be mindful in the future, under no circumstances should you take photos or videos inside the courthouse." "Got it. I'll remember that." Soon, Fang Jian retrieved the two cameras. As the three left the courthouse, Fang Xiaohua murmured, "Attorney Shang, something doesn't feel right." Shang Jinrui pondered. Judge Yao was right. Even if the footage was deleted, it's normal. They didn't do anything wrong. Fang Jian knew both of them were harboring doubts. When did the court become so proactive and efficient? But you couldn't exactly say that being proactive was a bad thing, could you? No matter where you filed a complaint, you wouldn't win. Fang Jian chuckled softly. "Brother Xiaohua, rest assured. Since we got the camera back, we'll definitely find the footage." Fang Xiaohua's eyes lit up slightly. "Right, we can have someone restore it and take a look." Fang Jian nodded with a smile, though his eyes held a hint of coldness. Shang Jinrui glanced at Fang Jian. She understood perfectly well that Fang Jian actually had a backup copy. But at this moment, he felt too embarrassed to say it. Soon, Fang Jian found Liang Chao and they went to the shop owned by Liang Chao's brother. After checking, the younger brother informed them. The footage on the camera's memory card had not only been deleted, but the memory card itself had been reformatted. The footage inside was now impossible to recover. Fang Xiaohua cursed loudly, but the next moment, Liang Chao pulled out another memory card and began playing it. After watching the footage, Fang Xiaohua slowly raised her head. His gaze swept over Fong Jian and Liang Chao several times before he slowly gave them a thumbs up. He wasn't stupid. Seeing Fong Jian and Liang Chao's actions, he understood everything. Fong Jian patted Liang Chao on the shoulder. "I'll file the report. You edit it and upload it." "Report it?" Fong Xiaohua asked in surprise. Fong Jian smiled faintly. "Yeah. We've come this far. If we don't report it, all our hard work would be for nothing." Fong Xiaohua and Shang Jinrui exchanged bewildered glances, both feeling a sense of absurdity. What the hell was Fong Jian playing at? Thus, an hour later, a meticulously edited video was disseminated online. Initially, the footage was raw and unedited, a complete, unfiltered recording of the entire incident, from Judge Yao's opening remarks through the escalating verbal confrontation to the physical altercation. Of course, it was only at the end that the meticulous editing and commentary appeared. The editing highlighted the two women's utterly brazen attitude and the moment they resorted to physical violence after being rendered speechless. Particularly notable was the moment when Fong Jian, after repeatedly dodging and sustaining scratches on his arm, finally retaliated with a slap. The final editing and commentary highlighted this sequence as the climax. Not just ordinary people, but even Fong Jian himself, after watching it, felt that this slap was absolutely spot on and incredibly satisfying. This was unquestionably self-defense. The final segment of the edit included a statement thanking Judge Yao for returning the video to clear his name. Thus, within half a day, the online sentiment shifted once more. Whether they were casual onlookers or those who had followed the incident closely, the more viciously they had attacked Fong Jian yesterday, the more remorseful they felt now. In the blink of an eye, a torrent of furious condemnation swept across the internet, overwhelming everything in its path. The online personalities who sought fame through this incident saw their personas completely collapse. Although they immediately deleted the interview videos, claiming they had been deceived, they were still mercilessly criticized. But this was only the beginning. The next day, they suddenly received a notice demanding corrective action within a strict deadline, which truly left them reeling. Because everyone knew that for influencers of their caliber, receiving such a notice essentially meant their accounts were about to be shut down. The deadline for rectification meant no deadline at all. Their stunt, while causing a huge uproar, ended up burning them to the ground. That night, Fong Jian slept soundly. In his dream, he once again received guidance from Master Li Shuwen. Over the course of 2 years, he mastered the cultivation method for Dan Jin. But in reality, how to cultivate Dan Jin? That would still require gradual exploration and accumulation. The next morning, just as Fong Jian finished his workout, a sudden phone call interrupted him. Judge Yao sounded somewhat impatient. "Mr. Fong Jian, what's the story with that video online?" Fong Jian replied cheerfully, "Judge Yao, it's you. Thank you so much." "Huh? What? You gave me that video, so I posted it. Thank goodness for that footage, otherwise, I'd have been wrongfully accused." Fong Jian added sincerely, "Thank you, Judge Yao." Judge Yao was speechless, feeling as if his head would explode. Earlier that day, he'd been summoned by the bureau chief and given a stern dressing down. How could he hand over internal court footage to an outsider like this? While this wouldn't cost him his job, but a reputation for being unreliable? That was inevitable. And for such a lapse to occur within the court, his career prospects were now utterly bleak. Impossible. That footage was clearly deleted. Judge Yao nearly roared. "Oh, Judge Yao, but when we retrieved the cameras for inspection, we discovered that while the footage from one camera had been deleted, the recording from the other camera was still intact." Fong Jian's voice was filled with bewilderment. "I thought you did this deliberately. I even gave you special thanks at the end of the video." Judge Yao hung up the phone, cursing inwardly. "Thank me? I'm FING grateful to you, aren't I? What's wrong with those tech guys? I told them to delete the footage and format the memory cards. Damn it, they only deleted one of the two cameras? Is this even humanly possible?" At that moment, he was filled with regret. If only he had been more careful yesterday when removing the equipment, if only he had checked it once more. Suddenly, the phone beside him rang. Glancing at the name, his expression darkened considerably. Damn it. It was precisely because he'd accepted this guy's request that he'd ended up in such a mess now. After a moment's hesitation, he answered the call. "Old Yao, how could you hand over the footage to them? What kind of stupid mistake did you make?" Hu Bin's furious voice blared through the phone. Judge Yao was seething inside himself. He replied coldly, "The tech department made a mistake. They only deleted the footage from one camera and forgot about the other one. Also, I'm not getting involved in this matter anymore. Goodbye." With that, he hung up. Chapter 150, Leave It to Me. Rehabilitation Hospital, hospital bed. Hu Bin stared blankly at the phone in his hand, his heart boiling with rage. He understood one thing from the other party's decisive tone. Judge Yao no longer wished to handle this matter. Not only that, but their relationship was bound to freeze over completely. From now on, any future encounters would amount to little more than a nod of acknowledgement. He had invested considerable effort to cultivate this connection. While the gifts he gave never reached the threshold of bribery, he never missed a single holiday or festive occasion to pay his respects. Years of effort destroyed in an instant. Naturally, he was furious. Damn it, it was just a minor thing. You clearly messed it up, yet you blame me? What a useless piece of trash. Hu Bin's face was twisted with resentment, yet he never considered the consequences. After this incident, how much resentment Judge Yao would face within the court. If not for his entrustment, this incident would never have occurred. The door suddenly swung open. A young man with a crew cut entered, his expression panicked. Young Master Hu, it's bad. Hu Bin turned his head. What is it? The young man with the crew cut said. Fang Jian went to the police station to file a report. He said Sun Qing's family slandered his reputation online. Then, Hu Bin sucked in a sharp breath and screamed, what? Fang Jian filed a report? He hit someone and he still has the nerve to file a report? At that moment, he was so furious his teeth ached. In this whole affair, Fang Jian hadn't suffered a single loss. What right did he have to file a report? The young man with the crew cut smiled bitterly, filled with regret. In truth, the moment Sun Cheng's trip had gone viral online, both of them had already begun to panic. So Hu Bin had immediately offered 300,000 yuan to get Sun Cheng to drop the matter. They feared the scandal would spiral out of control. If anyone traced the incident back to them through Sun Cheng, that would be real trouble. Everything seemed to have calmed down. But who could have predicted that at that very moment, several internet celebrities arrived? No one knew how they'd gotten wind of the situation. Fang Jian had been involved in a violent altercation at the courthouse, even knocking out a tooth of Sun Cheng's wife. Now, one by one, they were filled with righteous indignation and eager to take action. Upon hearing this news, Hu Bin's mind became active again. He let the influencers run wild, then asked Judge Yao to delete the footage. They assumed that without the footage, Fang Jian would be utterly vulnerable, doomed to be torn apart, his reputation destroyed, and socially ruined. Yet, despite all their calculations, they never anticipated this outcome. The footage wasn't deleted after all. Instead, it fell into Fang Jian's hands and was released. What's more, Fang Jian proved stubborn to the extreme. He actually reported the incident to the police. Reporting it to the police was the one thing they feared most. They could almost see it coming. Sun Cheng would never cover for him. Taking a deep breath, Hu Bin ordered, hurry. Go find Sun Cheng immediately. Tell him to keep his mother and wife's mouths shut. Not a single word must slip out, or else. He abruptly stopped, staring at his mournful-faced assistant. A very bad thought surged in his mind. What is it? Hu Bin asked, clinging to a sliver of hope. The young man with the crew cut replied bitterly, young Master Hu, it's too late. By the time I heard the news, the police had already taken them away. Hu Bin's mouth fell open. How could this be? How could this be? He knew full well how the police operated. Even if they took the case, it would be handled discreetly. How could they have acted so swiftly? Especially when it came to making arrests. Suddenly, Hu Bin's face turned deathly pale. Damn it, that bastard must have pulled strings too. Damn it. Inside the boxing club, Fang Jian and Wang Tianpao sparred wearing protective gear. Wang Tianpao attacked relentlessly, showing no sign of defense. Each punch he threw whistled through the air, though not every strike reached the peak of external force where it produced that signature crack. But his relentless flurry of over a dozen punches left the spectators below the ring spellbound. Yet Fang Jian, standing not far from Wang Tianpao, swayed effortlessly, occasionally pushing him aside with glancing blows from his gloved hands. Thus, Wang Tianpao's storm-like barrage of attacks all came to nothing. Ding! The bell rang, signaling the end of the 3-minute free attack period. Though this sparring session still lacked a referee, someone was now responsible for ringing the bell. Every 3 minutes. The moment the bell rang, Wang Tianpao immediately stepped back, gasping for breath. 3 minutes of sparring with Fang Jian. No, more accurately, those 3 minutes of him attacking and Fang Jian defending had drained him of immense physical energy. Even a 10-kilometer run with weights wouldn't leave him feeling this exhausted. Yet, the more grueling the training, the more Wang Tianpao relished it. He even sensed that his martial arts, stagnant for years, seemed poised to break free from their cocoon. Hidden Force. Fang Jian had already imparted the cultivation methods for Hidden Force to him. Of course, everyone's insights differed. Even though Fang Jian and his senior brother had shared their experiences of comprehending Hidden Force with him. But when he would find the cultivation method most suited to himself remained a hazy path ahead, difficult to discern. Taking a deep breath, Wang Tianpao rubbed his slightly aching arms and said, Fang Jian, let's rest for half an hour. Alright, Fang Jian replied indifferently. Wang Tianpao unstrapped his protective gear and sighed wryly, your physical constitution is too exceptional. If I push you any harder, you'll definitely get injured. Fang Jian smiled indifferently. I told you, once you master the transformation of force, this level of exercise won't be a problem. Hua Jin. Wang Tianpao couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. Damn it, I can't even generate Hidden Force yet, let alone transform force. He glanced at his phone. Silent mode. 3 missed calls from the same number flashed on the screen. He answered, listened for a few moments, gave a brief reply, and hung up. Fang Jian, do you know a guy named Hu Bin? Hu Bin? Fang Jian chuckled. Of course I know him. I broke one of his legs. Oh, that explains it, Wang Tianpao said. My brother just messaged me. They summoned Sun Qing's family, and those guys knelt the moment they stepped into the station. They spilled everything. Hu Bin paid them 300,000 to have Sun Qing cripple you on the court, at least put you out of commission for 3 months. He sneered coldly with disdain. Well, look at that. You didn't end up bedridden, but Sun Chang will be out of commission for months. Ha ha. Listening to his laughter, Fang Jian's lips curled slightly. Before reporting the incident to the police, he had called Wang Tianpao. Sure enough, Wang Tianpao didn't hesitate to call one of his former military comrades. As Wang Tianpao put it, they were brothers. If you wanted to harm his brother, you had to be prepared for retaliation. Thus, the outcome materialized immediately. In truth, even Fang Jian hadn't anticipated it. Those two women who looked fierce and formidable, as if they could take on the world, spilled everything the moment they arrived at the police station before any interrogation even began. This was the epitome of bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Brother, how do you plan to handle this? Fang Jian smiled faintly. What can I do? I'm a law-abiding citizen. Everything will proceed according to legal procedures. Wang Tianpao gave him a deep look and chuckled. All right, leave it to me. Everything will follow legal procedures. Fang Jian picked up his teacup and took a silent sip. Though Fang Jian didn't want to trouble his friend, he wasn't a stubborn fool. Since Wang Tianpao was his kind of guy and had the capability, he'd gladly accept his help. As for repayment. Half an hour later, Fang Jian glanced at the ring and said, time's up. Get back in. Wang Tianpao gritted his teeth. For the hidden strength. He'd give it his all. Chapter 151, The Linguistic Genius, Lessons from the Master. That night, Fang Jian sensed a subtle shift in his surroundings. Opening his eyes, he found himself immersed in a dreamscape. His father approached from afar, unfazed to see his son already seated. Son, you wanted a language tutor, right? Father chuckled. I found someone for you, a linguistic prodigy. I checked, and he's a master of over 20 languages. Over 20 languages? Fang Jian was slightly startled. Truthfully, learning languages truly required a certain natural aptitude. Without it, learning a foreign language felt like talking to a wall, as difficult as climbing to the moon. Yet for some, learning languages comes as easily as eating and drinking. 20+ languages, while certainly not the absolute peak, still marked him as a true prodigy. What's the teacher's name? Fang Jian asked casually. Let me see. I think it was Friedrich Engels, Dad said, glancing up at the sky. Upon hearing the name, Fang Jian froze, then his expression turned peculiar. Dad, is that the one? Dad silently nodded. Yes. Fang Jian instantly grew serious. Neither he nor his father would be unfamiliar with that name. Moreover, when it came to this man's lifetime achievements, mastering 20 languages was but a minor feat. All right, Dad. It's him. Fang Jian nodded without hesitation. Old man raised his hand and made a few gestures in the air. In the distance, a tall, slender man stepped into the circle from outside. As he drew nearer, anyone could see the thick beard covering his face. Hello, Mr. Fang. I speak German, English, French, Russian, Spanish, Greek, Latin, and other languages. Which one would you like to learn first? Fang Jian took a deep breath and replied in a respectful tone, Mr. Friedrich, I would like to start with English. He chose English because, although he had forgotten most of it, he still remembered some basics. When it came to learning languages, it was best to start with the easier ones and gradually progress to the more difficult ones. Very well. You may begin with English, followed by German. Both belong to the Germanic language family. Once you've gained a solid grasp of these two, we'll move on to French, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. These belong to the Romance language family. Once you master one, the others become relatively easier to pick up. Fang Jian felt a chill run down his spine as he listened. Back when he was studying, his grades in math and science were better than his humanities scores. His language scores, however, were the worst among all subjects. Now, listening to the words tumbling from Mr. Friedrich's mouth, Fang Jian felt a faint pang of regret. Why hadn't he tried harder back in school? Ah, what a waste of time. Fortunately, the Fang Jian of today was no longer the same person. When he set his mind to something, his formidable willpower ensured his mental focus remained unwavering. Listening intently to Mr. Friedrich's explanation, Fang Jian suddenly had a realization. English doesn't seem all that difficult after all. Because they were at the boundary between yin and yang, they were in a state of soul communication. Thus, although Mr. Friedrich conveyed his guidance through spoken language, Fang Jian absorbed it not only through his ears but also through his very consciousness. It could be said that while hearing the words, his spirit underwent a parallel explanation. This method of learning was truly one of a kind in the entire world. Mr. Friedrich had only explained it once, yet Fang Jian had already committed it to memory. This effect surpassed his English studies in school by more than tenfold. No, it was 100-fold improvement. The proverbs memorize at a glance, understand 10 things from one, and draw inferences from a single example all describe this phenomenon. Fang Jian had never realized he possessed such linguistic genius. It seemed he was a prodigy held back by the outdated educational methods of the modern era. 1 year later. In just 1 year, Fang Jian had already mastered 2 major languages, English and German. Moreover, he could now converse seamlessly with Mr. Friedrich in both languages without relying on the mental communication barrier. Of course, this communication was limited to everyday expressions. If they wanted to discuss anything high-tech, sorry, but Fang Jian's vocabulary simply wasn't sufficient. And it wasn't just Fang Jian. Mr. Friedrich faced the same limitation. After all, the time gap between his death and the modern era was simply too vast. Too many terms had been coined after his death. Even if he could converse with later generations, he couldn't possibly know much. Still, even if only everyday conversation succeeded, both Fang Jian and Mr. Friedrich found it deeply satisfying. He even bestowed upon Fang Jian the title of linguistic prodigy. After his morning exercise routine, he headed to the Xinhua bookstore with confidence. Armed with a year's experience learning 2 foreign languages in Mr. Friedrich's praise, Fang Jian felt he had become exceptionally intelligent. For him, languages no longer held any difficulty whatsoever. So he browsed around the Xinhua bookstore. Fang Jian bought over 30 books in one go. Among them were 11 that came with instructional DVDs. These books covered Japanese, Korean, Spanish, Italian, and Arabic. Back home, Fang Jian opened the Arabic textbook. He glanced through it for a moment. What the hell is this? These gibberish symbols, resembling tadpoles and all sorts of mysterious characters, is this really a language? After forcing himself to watch half an hour of videos, Fang Jian finally came to one conclusion. Arabs are definitely aliens on Earth. The language they created wasn't meant for people to learn, it was designed to torture them. In short, after half an hour, Fang Jian concluded he had absolutely no connection with Arabs whatsoever. Then, Fang Jian tossed aside all his Arabic textbooks. He casually picked up another book. It was Japanese for beginners. Japanese. Though Fang Jian didn't care for that country where life was so comfortable. But Wei Yuan had put it well, learn from the barbarians' strengths to control the barbarians. He had to admit that many things in that country were worth learning from. Given that, understanding this country becomes essential. From a linguistic perspective, both Japanese and Chinese belong to the Sino-Tibetan language family, with many Japanese words originating from Chinese. The 2 languages share significant similarities, with Japanese hiragana and katakana being phonetic scripts created based on Chinese characters. Therefore, those with a solid foundation in Chinese will undoubtedly find learning Japanese twice as effective with half the effort. Fang Jian confidently opened the Japanese language tutorial video. Half an hour. An hour. An hour and a half. Fang Jian silently shut off the video. He finally came to terms with one thing. Truthfully, his linguistic aptitude hadn't changed at all. It remained one of his greatest weaknesses. The reason he managed to master 2 languages in a year back then was probably because he had the advantage of soul communication. Without that unique environment and one-on-one guidance from a teacher, Fang Jian reverted to his true self from academic from academic god to academic failure. Of course, with his current foundation in 3 languages, coupled with his perseverance, learning a new language would undoubtedly be 1,000 times easier than before. But with the convenience of nighttime study at hand, why waste time now? Fang Jian rose, preparing himself a nutrient-rich medicinal meal and several dishes that were a feast for the eyes, nose, and palate. Time to treat himself properly. Tonight, he would continue his efforts. Chapter 152, Why are you carrying that flight notice? Passport. Fang Jian had had one for ages, but never used it. As for getting a visa, Fang Jian secured a Schengen visa in just 1 week. As for how he got it approved? That's a question for Zhang Tao. After all, the idea to tour European countries had come from Zhang Tao. As for the interviews, unbeknownst to Fang Jian, he passed them all. Well, according to Zhang Tao, Mr. Robert, who was already in Italy working tirelessly to release Fang Jian's music album, had been instrumental in making it happen. Early in the morning, Zhang Tao chartered a minibus to pick up Fang Jian and the others, heading toward the metropolis. Only Shanghai offered direct flights to Milan. The minibus could typically seat over a dozen people. Now, besides the driver, only Zhang Tao and his wife, Fang Jian, and the 3 girls were aboard. So the seats were empty. After boarding the bus, Fang Jian glanced at Luan Wani and Wang Donglian, then without a word grabbed Zhang Tao's arm. The guy had originally wanted to sit with his wife, but he couldn't match Fang Jian's strength, so he reluctantly accompanied Fang Jian to the third to last row. Up front, a few young girls chattered incessantly. Zhang Tao muttered resentfully, Fang Jian, I asked you to come along to block them, not to be the third wheel. Fang Jian rolled his eyes at him impatiently. I don't care. If you want me to stop being a third wheel, it's easy, just make sure you take good care of Miss Wang. Put. She's clearly yours. Why drag me into this? Fang Jian stood there with an air of calm confidence, clearly not backing down until Zhang Tao agreed. Truth be told, before this trip, Fang Jian had also invited Wang Tianpao. But Wang Tianpao had rejected him without mercy. The reason was simple: the guy couldn't leave the country for several years. He didn't elaborate on the details, and Fang Jian didn't press him. They both understood perfectly well. Before departing, Wang Tianpao spoke earnestly. "Brother, I'm entrusting my sister to you. I wouldn't mind coming back to find a little nephew." Hearing this, Fang Jian nearly severed ties with Wang Tianpao on the spot. So, once aboard the minibus, Fang Jian made up his mind. No matter what, he wouldn't let Zhang Tao off easy. Over 2 hours later, they arrived at Pudong Airport. Boarding and security checks for international flights took longer, but Zhang Tao had booked luxurious first-class seats. Not only did he have a dedicated security lane, but the seats on the plane were exceptionally comfortable, reclining fully into beds for sleeping at night. Naturally, such luxurious seating came with a price tag to match. But this price was no burden for anyone present. Zhang Tao had purchased all the tickets, and Fang Jian didn't hesitate to accept them. Since this was a domestic flight to Milan, Italy, the pre-takeoff announcements were broadcast in 3 languages. First in English, then Italian, and finally Chinese.